When the elevator doors opened on the 47th floor, Adrian Cole knew he'd made a terrible mistake. But it was already too late. The woman standing inside wasn't just any executive. She was Vivian Cross, the billionaire CEO whose empire stretched across 3 continents, the woman whose father had destroyed his entire life. And worst of all, she was the only person he'd ever truly loved. 8 years had passed since he disappeared without explanation. 8 years since she stopped waiting. And now, trapped in 12 square feet of polished steel, there was nowhere left to run. If you're ready for a story about buried truth, second chances, and the price of loving someone from a different world, stay with me until the very end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The fluorescent lights in the basement maintenance corridor buzzed with the same exhausted hum Adrian Cole felt in his bones. His work boots scraped against concrete as he pushed the supply cart toward the service elevator, his reflection barely visible in the dull metal doors. 32 years old and he looked 40, the kind of tired that sleep couldn't fix. "Dad!" Adrian turned. Mia stood 15 feet away, her pink backpack almost bigger than her 7-year-old frame, her fingers moving in rapid sign language. "You forgot your lunch again." He smiled despite the ache in his shoulders and signed back. "What would I do without you?" "Starve," she signed, her expression serious in that way only children could manage. She held up a crumpled paper bag with a peanut butter sandwich inside. The bread was probably crushed, but it was made with more love than anything he could buy. Adrian knelt down, eye level with his daughter. Her hair was pulled back in 2 slightly crooked ponytails, his best attempt this morning. He'd gotten better at them over the years, but he'd never quite mastered the perfect symmetry other parents seemed to manage effortlessly. "Thank you," he signed. "Now get to Mrs. Chen's apartment before you're late for the bus." "You're working late again?" "Just a little. I'll be home for dinner, I promise." Mia studied his face with those dark, knowing eyes that saw too much for someone so young. Then she wrapped her small arms around his neck, squeezed hard, and ran back down the corridor without looking back. She knew he hated long goodbyes. Adrian stood, joints protesting, and pressed the elevator button. The service elevator was slow, ancient, groaning its way through the building's guts like everything else down here. He checked his watch. 7:47 a.m. If he hustled, he could finish the air filter replacements on the 12th floor before his shift supervisor started breathing down his neck about yesterday's incomplete work orders. The doors finally opened. He shoved the cart inside, hit the button for 12, and leaned against the back wall. The elevator lurched upward with a mechanical wheeze that probably meant another repair was coming soon. Not his department, not his problem. Except the elevator didn't stop at 12. It blew right past, the number lighting up and vanishing like it had never been there at all. Adrian frowned and jabbed the button again. Nothing. The elevator kept climbing. 14. 17. 23. "Come on," he muttered, pressing the emergency stop. The button clicked uselessly under his thumb. 31. 38. 44. His stomach tightened. He knew exactly where this elevator was going now, and it wasn't anywhere maintenance workers were supposed to be. The executive floors, the polished, pristine levels where people wore suits that cost more than his annual rent and made decisions that changed lives without ever seeing the faces attached to them. 47. The elevator shuddered to a stop. Adrian grabbed the cart, ready to back out quickly, head down, invisible. He'd learned that skill years ago. How to be nobody. How to disappear in plain sight. The doors opened, and Vivian Cross was standing right there. For one suspended second, Adrian forgot how to breathe. She looked exactly the same. No, that wasn't true. She looked sharper now, refined in a way that 8 years and a fortune could buy. Her dark hair was pulled back in a style that probably had a French name he'd never heard of. Her suit was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, the kind of elegant that didn't need to announce itself. But her eyes, those hadn't changed. Still that particular shade of brown that looked amber in the right light. Still carrying that intensity that made you feel seen, really seen, even when you didn't want to be. She froze mid-step, her phone halfway to her ear. Their eyes met. Recognition hit her face like a slap. Her lips parted. The phone slipped an inch in her hand before she caught it. "Adrian?" His name in her voice was a knife he thought he'd gone numb to years ago. Turned out he was wrong. His throat closed up. "Wrong floor, sorry." He reached for the door close button like a drowning man reaching for air, but Vivian's hand shot out and stopped the door. She stepped inside. The elevator suddenly felt half its actual size. "Wait," she said. Adrian pressed himself against the back wall, his knuckles white on the cart handle. "I need to go." "You need to—" She stared at him like he was a ghost. "Adrian, you disappeared 8 years ago. You just vanished." "I know. You know?" Her voice climbed. "That's what you have to say? You know?" The elevator doors closed behind her. They were alone now, suspended between floors, between past and present, between everything they'd been and everything they'd become. "Ms. Cross, I really need to get back to work." He kept his eyes on the floor, on his scuffed boots, on anything that wasn't her face. "Don't call me that. It's your name. You know what I mean." She moved closer and he could smell her perfume, something expensive and unfamiliar. 8 years ago, she'd worn something from the drugstore, something sweet and simple. This was different. She was different. "Where did you go?" "Does it matter?" "Does it—" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You left. The night before we were supposed to meet your family. The night before we were going to tell my father about us. You just left. No note, no call, nothing." "I'm sorry." "You're sorry." She repeated it like the words were in a language she didn't speak. "I looked for you for months. I hired investigators. I thought something terrible had happened. I thought—" Her voice cracked and she stopped, visibly pulling herself together. When she spoke again, her tone was ice. "And here you are, pushing a maintenance cart in my building. It's a job. It's my building, Adrian. You're working in my building. How long?" 3 years. 3 years. She pressed her fingers to her temple. "You've been here for 3 years, and you never—" "I didn't know it was yours." That was partially true. He'd known Cross Development owned the property. He hadn't known Vivian had taken over the company. He'd stopped following news about her because it hurt too much, like staring at the sun. "I just needed work. As a maintenance worker. It's honest work. You had a degree. You were going to be a structural engineer. You were—" She stopped herself. "What happened to you?" The question hung between them, loaded with 8 years of unanswered hurt. Adrian could feel the weight of everything he couldn't say pressing down on his chest. The threats. The blackmail. The choice between his career and innocent lives. The pregnancy test Mia's mother had shown him the same week everything fell apart. The impossible decision he'd made in a basement parking garage with 2 men in expensive suits who promised to destroy everyone he loved if he didn't disappear. "Life happened," he said. "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I have." Vivian stared at him for a long moment. Then she reached past him and pressed the button for 47. "We're not done talking." "Yes, we are." He hit the button for the basement. "I have work to do." She pressed 47 again. "I'm the CEO of this company. I'm telling you to come upstairs. And I'm telling you I can't." He punched the basement button harder. They stood there, 2 stubborn people in a stalled elevator, jabbing buttons like it would solve anything. Finally, Vivian pulled out her phone and made a call. "Security, override elevator 7 and send it to the executive floor." She hung up before Adrian could protest. The elevator jolted and began climbing again. "You can't just—" "I can," Vivian said quietly. "And I am. Because you owe me answers. You owe me the truth about why you left." "I don't owe you anything. You told me you loved me. That was a long time ago. 3 weeks before you vanished, Adrian. You told me you loved me, that you wanted to build a life together, that you didn't care if my father approved or not. You said we'd figure it out." Her voice was steady now, controlled, but he could hear the fury underneath. "And then you were just gone. So yes, you owe me answers. You owe me that much." The elevator climbed past the 40th floor. Adrian closed his eyes. He could walk away. He could get fired. He could find another job, another building, another life built on avoiding the past. He'd done it before. But he was so tired of running. "Fine," he said. 30 minutes. Then I'm done." "Fine." The doors opened on 47. Vivian stepped out first, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Adrian followed with his maintenance cart, acutely aware of how out of place he looked in this world of glass walls and abstract art and silence, so expensive you could feel it. She led him past assistants who stared, past conference rooms with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, past a life he'd once imagined being part of from the other side. Her office was at the end of the hall, a corner suite with a view that stretched for miles. Vivian closed the door behind them and gestured to a chair. "Sit." "I'll stand." "Adrian, I'm dirty. I don't want to mess up your furniture." She looked at him like he'd said something in a foreign language. Then she walked to her desk, poured 2 glasses of water from a crystal pitcher, and handed him one. He took it because refusing felt petty. "Talk," she said. "About what?" "Don't." Her control slipped for just a second. "Don't play games with me. Not after all this time." Adrian set the water down untouched. "What do you want me to say? That I'm sorry? I already said that. That I had my reasons? I did. That I regret it?" He met her eyes. "Every single day." "Then why?" "Because I didn't have a choice." "Everyone has a choice. Not when choosing wrong means people die." The words came out harsher than he intended. Vivian's expression shifted from anger to confusion. "What are you talking about?" Adrian ran his hand through his hair. He was already in too deep. Might as well finish drowning. "You remember the Riverside project? The housing development? My father's signature project from 8 years ago?" "Yeah, that one." Adrian walked to the window, putting distance between them. The city sprawled below, endless concrete and glass and lives being lived in buildings that might or might not be safe. "I was doing consulting work for the structural engineering firm, quality assurance, making sure everything was up to code. I remember you were so excited about it. I found problems, Vivian. Major ones. The concrete mixture was wrong, way wrong. The rebar spacing in the support columns wasn't meeting specifications. The foundation work was sloppy, rushed, cutting corners to stay on budget." He turned to face her. That building was going to fail. Maybe not immediately, but in 10 years, 15, those support columns were going to crack. The weight distribution was all wrong. If the building had stayed occupied, if it had filled up with families like it was supposed to. He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Vivian's face had gone pale. "You reported it." "I tried. I went to my supervisor first. He told me to keep my mouth shut. I went over his head to the project manager. Same response. So I pulled together all my documentation, every code violation, every test result that showed the concrete failing, and I scheduled a meeting with the city inspector. And? The night before that meeting, 2 men came to my apartment. They knew my schedule. They knew about you. They knew I'd been looking at engagement rings." His voice was flat now, reciting facts like they'd happened to someone else. "They told me if I went to that inspector, the documentation would disappear. I'd be blacklisted from every engineering firm in the state. They'd make sure I never worked in my field again. And if I kept pushing..." "What?" "They showed me pictures, Vivian, of you leaving your apartment, of your route to work, of the coffee shop you went to every morning." He swallowed hard. "They said accidents happen all the time in cities like this. People step in front of cars. People fall on subway platforms. They were very specific about how easy it would be." The silence in the office was suffocating. Vivian gripped the edge of her desk, her knuckles white. "You're saying someone threatened to kill me?" "They didn't use those words. They didn't have to." "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you go to the police?" "And say what? 2 men in suits made vague threats. I had no proof. No names. Nothing." He laughed bitterly. "And I couldn't tell you because you would have done exactly what you're thinking right now. You would have marched into your father's office and demanded answers. And then they would have known I'd talked. So I did the only thing I could think of. I disappeared." "You ran." "I survived." Adrian's voice hardened. "I backed away from the project. I withdrew my findings. I let it go. But I couldn't stay in the city, couldn't stay near you, because as long as I was around, you were in danger. So I left. I moved. I changed my number. I made sure you'd hate me enough to stop looking." "It worked." Vivian's voice was barely a whisper. "I did hate you. For years." "Good. That kept you safe." "Safe from what?" "What happened to the building?" Adrian looked out the window again. "I don't know. I never followed up. I was too scared to look. For all I know, they fixed the problems after I left. Or maybe the building's still standing on faulty foundations, and I just didn't push hard enough to stop it. The guilt was acid in his throat. I sold out. I chose my life and yours over the truth. I've been living with that choice ever since. Vivian was quiet for a long time. Then she walked to a cabinet, pulled out a tablet, and started typing. What was the project address? Vivian, the address, Adrian. He gave it to her. She pulled up files, records, inspection reports. Her face got paler with every screen. Finally, she turned the tablet around to show him. The building was completed on schedule, full occupancy within 6 months. It's been standing for 8 years. She scrolled through more documents. No structural issues reported, no evacuations, no investigations. Adrian's chest loosened slightly. So they fixed it. Or they buried it better than you could dig. She kept scrolling. All the inspection reports are signed by... She stopped. Her finger hovered over a name. No. What? The chief inspector, the one who signed off on every phase. She looked up at him, and there was something breaking behind her eyes. It's my father's college roommate. They've been friends for 40 years. The air left the room. Adrian sat down hard in the chair he'd refused earlier. Jesus. My father knew. Vivian's voice was shaking now. He had to have known. That's why those men came to you. That's why they threatened. She couldn't finish the sentence. She set the tablet down carefully, like it might explode. My father destroyed your life to cover up a safety scandal. We don't know that for sure. Don't! She whirled on him. Don't make excuses for him. Not now. I'm not. I'm just saying he did this. He sent men to threaten you. He made you disappear. He let me believe you'd abandon me because you couldn't handle my family's wealth or the pressure or... Her voice cracked. I mourned you. I mourned what we could have been, and it was all a lie. Adrian stood and took a step toward her, then stopped himself. He had no right to comfort her. Not anymore. I'm sorry. Stop saying that. She wiped her eyes angrily, smearing mascara. Stop apologizing for things that weren't your fault. I should have fought harder. You should have trusted me. I did. That's why I left. Because I knew you'd try to fight, and I couldn't let you get hurt. That wasn't your choice to make. Yes, it was. His voice rose to match hers. You don't get it, Vivian. You've never been powerless. You've never had to choose between doing the right thing and protecting the person you love. I was 24 years old, barely making rent, going up against a multi-billion-dollar corporation. What was I supposed to do? Get us both killed? You were supposed to let me stand with you and watch you die for it? Watch your father destroy you to protect his empire? No, I couldn't. He was breathing hard now, years of buried anger finally surfacing. You want to be mad at me? Fine, be mad. But I did what I had to do to keep you alive. If that makes me a coward, then I'm a coward. I can live with that. Vivian stared at him, her chest heaving, tears streaming down her face. Then she did something he didn't expect. She closed the distance between them and pressed her forehead against his chest. Not a hug, just contact, like she needed to prove he was real. I looked for you for so long, she whispered. Adrian stood very still, his hands at his sides. He didn't trust himself to touch her. I know. I thought I'd done something wrong. I thought you'd woken up and realized I wasn't worth it. That was never true. Then where have you been? Really? For 8 years? He could feel her warmth through his work shirt, could smell that expensive perfume, mixing with something underneath, something that was just her, unchanged by time or money. It would be so easy to wrap his arms around her, to pretend the last 8 years hadn't happened, to fall back into the thing they'd been before the world broke them apart. But he had Mia now, and Mia changed everything. I've been surviving, he said quietly. I worked construction jobs under the table for a while, moved around, avoided anything that would put my name in the system. Eventually I settled down, got a job with a small property management company, learned maintenance work. It doesn't pay much, but it's steady. It's safe. Are you alone? The question was so quiet he almost didn't hear it. He stepped back, putting space between them again. That's not a fair question. Why not? Because you know the answer doesn't matter. Whatever happened in the last 8 years, whatever life I built, it doesn't change anything between us. Doesn't it? Vivian. He said her name carefully, like it might break. Look at where we are. You're the CEO of a $1 billion company. I fix leaking pipes and change air filters. Those men who threatened me 8 years ago, they're probably still out there. Your father is still in power. Nothing's changed except now you know the truth, and that just makes it worse." "Everything's changed," she said fiercely. "I know what happened. I know you didn't leave because you wanted to. I know my father—" She stopped, visibly struggling. "I know what he did." "And what are you going to do with that information?" "I don't know yet." "Well, when you figure it out, make sure you think it through. Because if you go after your father with this, if you try to expose what happened, you're going to start a war. And people like you and me, we don't win those wars. Maybe not." She lifted her chin. "But I'm not 24 anymore. I'm not powerless. And I sure as hell am not going to let this go." Adrian looked at her, really looked at her. The grief and fury and determination written across her face. The strength she'd built in 8 years of running a company, making impossible decisions, becoming someone who didn't back down from fights. She was magnificent, and she was going to get herself killed. "Don't," he said. "Please, just let it go." "Let it go?" "Adrian, there could be families living in a structurally unsound building right now. There could be children sleeping in bedrooms held up by faulty foundations. You know this. You tried to stop it 8 years ago. How can you ask me to just walk away?" "Because I'm asking you to stay alive. I'm not afraid of my father." "You should be." The words fell between them like a barrier. Vivian's expression hardened. "Get out." "What?" "Get out of my office. Go back to your maintenance work. Keep hiding in basements and pretending the last 8 years didn't happen." Her voice was cold now. The CEO voice. The one that fired people and closed billion-dollar deals. "If you're too scared to fight, fine. But don't expect me to be." "Vivian, we're done here." Adrian felt something break inside his chest. He'd known this would happen. Known that the moment she learned the truth, she'd try to charge in and fix it. Consequences be damned. And he couldn't stop her. He had no right to stop her, but he couldn't watch her destroy herself either. "If you go after your father with this, I can't protect you," he said quietly. "I never asked you to." "I know, but I'm telling you anyway. Whatever happens next, I can't be part of it. I have someone who depends on me now. I can't risk—" "Who?" He hesitated too long. Vivian's eyes narrowed. "Who depends on you, Adrian? It doesn't matter. You said you weren't alone." "I said that's not a fair question." "Answer it anyway." Adrian grabbed the door handle. "I have a daughter. Her name is Mia. She's 7. I'm all she has. So whatever crusade you're planning, I can't be part of it. I'm sorry." He opened the door and walked out before she could respond. Behind him, he heard something crash, glass shattering against marble. He didn't look back. The elevator ride down felt longer than the ride up. Adrian leaned against the wall, his heart hammering, his hands shaking. He'd just blown up 8 years of careful distance in 30 minutes. He told Vivian the truth. He'd exposed himself. And for what? She was going to go after her father anyway. She was going to start digging into that building, into the cover-up, into everything he'd run away from. And when she did, those men in suits would come back. Maybe not for him this time, but definitely for her. The elevator reached the basement. The doors opened onto familiar concrete and fluorescent lights and the smell of industrial cleaner. Adrian pushed his cart out and stood there for a moment, trying to remember what he was supposed to be doing. Air filters. 12th floor. Work orders. His phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Chen. "Mia got on the bus fine. She drew you a picture. It's on the fridge." Adrian closed his eyes and focused on breathing. Mia. He had to think about Mia, not Vivian, not the past, not the bomb that was about to go off on the 47th floor. Just Mia. He checked his watch. 8:34 a.m. The entire disaster had taken less than an hour. He still had a full shift ahead of him, still had work orders to complete, still had a life to maintain. He grabbed the cart and headed for the service stairs. The elevator suddenly felt too risky. Too much chance of running into her again. Too much chance of being pulled back into a story he'd spent 8 years trying to forget. But as he climbed the stairs, pushing the cart one step at a time, he couldn't stop thinking about what Vivian had said. About families living in that building. about children sleeping in unsafe bedrooms, about the choice he'd made to walk away and let it happen. He'd told himself for 8 years that he'd done the right thing, that survival was its own form of courage, that protecting Vivian had been worth the cost. But what if he'd been wrong? What if all he'd really done was delay the inevitable? What if that building was still standing on faulty foundations and all his running had accomplished was making sure he wasn't there when it finally fell? Adrian reached the 12th floor and started replacing air filters. Mechanical work, mindless work, the kind of work that usually quieted his brain. But not today. Today, all he could think about was Vivian's face when she'd looked at those inspection reports. The horror, the betrayal, the determination. She was going to fight. And when she did, everything he'd sacrificed to keep her safe would be for nothing. He finished the first filter and moved to the next office. Through the window, he could see the city stretched out below, all those buildings holding all those lives, all built on someone's promise that they were safe. His phone buzzed again. Not Mrs. Chen this time. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him. Hello? Mr. Cole? A man's voice, smooth, professional, unfamiliar. We need to talk about your conversation with Ms. Cross this morning. Adrian's blood turned to ice. Who is this? Someone who's been watching out for her father's interests for a very long time. Someone who remembers the agreement you made 8 years ago. A pause. You were supposed to stay away from her. I didn't. It was an accident. Wrong elevator. Accidents are dangerous things, Mr. Cole, especially when they involve sensitive information and emotional reunions. Ms. Cross is making phone calls right now, asking questions about old projects, looking into records that should stay sealed. That's a problem. I didn't tell her to do that. But you told her enough to make her curious, and curiosity is going to get people hurt. Starting with your daughter. Adrian's hand tightened on the phone. Don't you dare. Mia, isn't it? 7 years old, goes to school on the number 12 bus every morning. Has a very kind neighbor named Mrs. Chen who watches her after school. The voice remained pleasant, conversational. Beautiful little girl. It would be terrible if something happened to her. If you touch her, then make sure we don't have to. Talk to Ms. Cross. Convince her to let the past stay buried. Tell her you lied, you made it all up. Whatever it takes, just make her stop looking. You have 24 hours. The line went dead. Adrian stood frozen in the empty office, the phone still pressed to his ear, his whole world collapsing around him. They knew about Mia. They'd been watching him all this time, keeping track, making sure he stayed in line. And now Vivian had kicked the hornet's nest and his daughter was going to pay the price. He called Mrs. Chen. She answered on the second ring. Adrian, is everything okay? Is Mia there? No, dear, she's at school. The bus picked her up right on time. Is something wrong? I need you to pick her up early, right now. Tell the school it's a family emergency. Adrian, what's happened? Please, just do it. Take her to your apartment and lock the door. Don't let anyone in except me. I'll explain everything later, I promise. There was a long pause, then, I'll get her now. Thank you. He hung up and immediately called the school. The secretary was understanding. A family emergency, yes. Mrs. Chen was authorized to pick her up. Yes, please don't release her to anyone else. He made her repeat it twice. Then he ran. Not for the elevator, not for the stairs, for the emergency exit at the end of the hall, the one that led straight to the parking garage, the one that would get him out of this building and to Mrs. Chen's apartment as fast as possible. Because he'd made the wrong choice 8 years ago. He'd chosen safety over truth, silence over justice. And now the past was coming for him anyway. And Mia was in the crosshairs and everything he'd sacrificed had been for nothing. He hit the emergency exit at a full sprint. The alarm blared, but he didn't slow down. Behind him, somewhere in that tower of glass and steel and buried secrets, Vivian Cross was making phone calls and asking questions and starting a war she didn't know how to win. And Adrian was running again, just like he'd always run. But this time, he wasn't running away. He was running toward the only thing that had ever really mattered. Mrs. Chen's apartment smelled like jasmine tea and old books. Adrian sat on the worn couch with Mia curled against his side, her small hand gripping his shirt like she was afraid he'd disappear if she let go. She'd asked him 3 times in sign language if everything was okay. He'd lied 3 times and told her yes. Through the thin walls, he could hear Mrs. Chen in the kitchen pretending to be busy with dishes that were already clean. She'd taken one look at his face when he'd arrived and asked no questions, just ushered them inside and locked the deadbolt. She'd been their neighbor for 5 years, had watched Mia since she was 2 years old, and knew when to give them space. Adrian's phone sat on the coffee table like a loaded gun. No new calls, no new texts, just silence, which somehow felt worse than threats. Mia tapped his arm. "What's wrong?" "Nothing, sweetheart. Just a work thing." "You're lying." Her expression was too knowing, too serious. "You never pick me up early." He pulled her closer, kissed the top of her head. She smelled like the strawberry shampoo they'd bought last week, the kind that came in the bottle shaped like a cartoon character. Normal things, safe things, the kind of things that felt impossibly fragile right now. "I just wanted to see you," he signed. "Is that so bad?" She studied his face with those dark eyes that missed nothing, then settled back against him without arguing. She knew he was lying. She was letting him get away with it. 7 years old and already protecting him from things she didn't understand. His phone buzzed. Adrian's whole body tensed. Mia felt it and sat up, watching him. It was a text from an unknown number. "Tick-tock, Mr. Cole." He deleted it and turned the phone face down. 24 hours, they'd said. 24 hours to convince Vivian to stop digging, or else. The "or else" was sitting right next to him, playing with the frayed edge of his work shirt, trusting him to keep her safe. "Adrian?" Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway, drying her hands on a towel that didn't need drying. "There's someone at the door." His heart stopped. "Who?" "A woman. Expensive suit. She says her name is Vivian Cross and she needs to speak with you." Mrs. Chen's voice was carefully neutral. "Should I tell her you're not here?" Adrian closed his eyes. Of course Vivian had found him. She probably had access to every employee record in the building, including his emergency contact information. She'd always been relentless when she wanted answers. "It's okay," he said quietly. "Let her in." Mrs. Chen hesitated, then nodded and disappeared. Adrian heard the door open, heard Vivian's voice, polite and professional, thanking Mrs. Chen. Then footsteps in the hallway. Vivian appeared in the living room doorway and stopped. Her eyes went immediately to Mia, taking in the way the little girl was pressed against Adrian's side, the protective way his arm was wrapped around her shoulders. Something complicated crossed Vivian's face. Surprise? Understanding? Pain. Mia looked up at Adrian, questioning. He signed, "This is an old friend. Her name is Vivian. Can you say hello?" Mia turned to Vivian and waved shyly. Vivian's expression softened instantly. She stepped into the room and knelt down so she was at Mia's eye level, not towering over her. "Hi," Vivian said softly. "It's nice to meet you." Mia's hands moved. "She can't hear me." "She's deaf," Adrian translated. "Congenital. She uses sign language." Vivian's eyes widened slightly. Then she looked back at Mia and smiled. She raised her hands and signed slowly and carefully. "Hello. My name is Vivian. It was basic ASL, clearly rusty, probably learned years ago and half forgotten." But Mia's whole face lit up. She signed back rapidly. "You know sign language?" "A little," Vivian signed. "I'm very rusty." "That's okay. You're doing good." Adrian watched this exchange with something twisting in his chest. Vivian had taken an ASL class in college, he remembered suddenly. She'd mentioned it once, years ago, saying she'd wanted to learn but never kept up with it. And here she was, pulling out those old skills for his daughter, making Mia smile in a way she usually reserved for people she felt safe with. Vivian stood up and met Adrian's eyes. "Can we talk?" "Not here," he said quietly. "Adrian, not in front of her." Vivian nodded. "Okay. Outside?" He looked down at Mia. "I need to talk to Vivian for a few minutes. Stay here with Mrs. Chen, okay? Is she the work thing?" "Yes. Is it bad?" "I don't know yet." He kissed her forehead. "I'll be right outside, I promise." Mia let him go reluctantly. Mrs. Chen appeared as if summoned and guided Mia toward the kitchen, already signing about cookies and homework. Adrian followed Vivian into the hallway and closed the apartment door behind them. The hallway was narrow, painted a color that might have been beige once, but had faded to something more like sadness. Vivian looked wildly out of place here in her tailored suit and expensive heels, like she'd stepped through a portal from a different world. "How did you find me?" Adrian asked. "Your employee file listed this address as your emergency contact. I assumed you went through my personnel records?" "I'm the CEO. I have access to everything." She crossed her arms. "We need to talk about what happened this morning." "There's nothing to talk about. I told you to let it go. And I told you I can't." Her voice was fierce but quiet, mindful of the thin walls. "Adrian, I've been making calls all day. I pulled every record I could find on that Riverside project. The deeper I dig, the worse it gets. Inspection reports signed by people on my father's payroll. Safety violations that were never filed. Code enforcement officers who retired early with very generous severance packages." She paused. "You were right. It was a cover-up. A massive one. So drop it." "I can't." "Yes, you can. You just choose not to. There are 240 families living in that building right now, Adrian. 240 families in a structure that might not be safe. I pulled the original engineering reports you filed 8 years ago. The concrete compression tests were 40% below code. The rebar spacing in the support columns, you were right about all of it. And if you were right about the problems, then you were right about what happens if they're not fixed." Adrian leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. "They threatened you." "What?" "The men who came to me 8 years ago. They said they'd hurt you if I didn't back off. That's why I left. That's why I disappeared. Because I couldn't let you get caught in the middle of this." "I'm already in the middle of it. I've been in the middle of it my whole life. I just didn't know it." Vivian's voice shook. "My father built his empire on cutting corners and paying off inspectors. The Riverside project wasn't the first. I've been going through old files all day, Adrian. There are at least 6 other projects with the same patterns, the same friendly inspectors, the same suspiciously clean reports. How many buildings has he put up that aren't safe? How many families are living in structures that could fail? Japasis automiem. And what are you going to do about it? Storm into his office and demand answers? He'll deny everything. He'll say you're being emotional, that you're listening to a disgruntled ex-employee with an axe to grind. He'll shut you down, and nothing will change except now he'll know you're looking. So I should just ignore it?" "Yes." The word came out louder than he intended. Vivian flinched. Adrian ran his hand through his hair, trying to find calm he didn't feel. "Listen to me," he said quietly. "This morning after I left your office, I got a phone call. They know we talked. They know you're asking questions, and they threatened Mia." All the color drained from Vivian's face. "What?" "They know her name, they know her schedule, they know about Mrs. Chen. They told me I have 24 hours to convince you to stop digging, or else." He met her eyes. "These people don't make empty threats. I learned that 8 years ago. And I am not going to let my daughter get hurt because you want to fight a battle you can't win." "Adrian, no. You don't get to do this. You don't get to waltz back into my life after 8 years and blow everything up because you finally learned the truth. I made my choice a long time ago. I chose to walk away. I chose to keep the people I love safe, and that hasn't changed. So you're just going to keep hiding, keep your head down, and hope they leave you alone? If that's what it takes to keep Mia safe, yes." Vivian stared at him like she didn't recognize him. The Adrian I knew would never have walked away from this. He would have fought. The Adrian you knew didn't have a daughter. "Is that what you tell yourself? That you're being noble?" Her voice was sharp now, cutting. "You're not protecting her, Adrian. You're teaching her that when powerful people do terrible things, the right response is to shut up and take it. You're teaching her that the truth doesn't matter as long as you can keep pretending everything's fine. Don't you dare lecture me about raising my daughter. I'm not lecturing you about parenting. I'm telling you that running away didn't work 8 years ago and it's not going to work now. They're already threatening Mia. That means they're scared. That means we're close to something they don't want exposed." "There is no we." Adrian pushed off the wall. "I'm not doing this with you. I can't. Go back to your office, Vivian. Go back to your billion-dollar life. Let this go. What about the families in that building? What about them? You were willing to risk everything to save them 8 years ago. What changed?" "I did!" The words exploded out of him. "I changed. I learned that trying to be a hero just gets you crushed. I learned that the system is rigged and people like your father always win. I learned that the best I can do is keep my head down, do my job, and make sure my daughter has food on the table and a roof over her head. That's it. That's all I've got left." Vivian was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. Tell me about her mother. The question hit him sideways. What? Mia's mother. Where is she? That's none of your business. Adrian, she's gone, okay? She left when Mia was 6 months old. Said she couldn't handle having a deaf baby, couldn't handle the financial stress, couldn't handle any of it. So she walked out, and I haven't heard from her since. It's been me and Mia ever since. He could hear the bitterness in his own voice. Satisfied? I'm sorry. Don't be. We're better off without her. You've been raising her alone for 6.5 years? Mrs. Chen helps, and Mia's teacher is amazing. We manage. On a maintenance worker's salary. It's enough. Is it? Vivian's eyes swept over the worn hallway, the peeling paint, the door with 3 different locks. Is this really enough for you? It's what I have, it's what we have, and it's safe. That matters more than anything else. Safe until it's not. Vivian pulled out her phone. I'm hiring security for you, private protection, someone to watch Mia while she's at school, someone to... No. Adrian, they threatened your daughter, and bringing in private security will just signal that you're still digging. It'll make everything worse. He took the phone from her hands gently and gave it back. The only way to keep Mia safe is for you to drop this. Please. I can't. Her voice broke. Adrian, I can't. Don't you understand? My father built his fortune on putting people in danger. How many families are at risk right now because he cut corners? How many buildings could collapse? How many people could die? And I'm supposed to just ignore that because it's easier? Yes. Because fighting it will get you killed. Maybe. But at least I'll die knowing I tried. That's not romantic, Vivian. That's just stupid. She slapped him. The sound cracked through the narrow hallway like a gunshot. Adrian's head snapped to the side, his cheek stinging. They both stood there, breathing hard, the violence of it shocking them into silence. I'm sorry, Vivian whispered. I didn't mean... Yes, you did. Adrian touched his cheek. It would bruise. And maybe I deserved it. You don't deserve any of this. Neither does Mia. Neither do those families. She was crying now, not bothering to hide it. I just found out that everything I thought I knew about my life was a lie. My father isn't the man I thought he was. The company I've been running for 3 years is built on fraud. And the only person who ever told me the truth, the only person who tried to protect me, is standing here telling me to look the other way while people die. So yeah, I slapped you, because I needed you to wake up and remember who you used to be. I'm not that person anymore. Prove it. Help me expose this. I can't. Can't or won't. Both. Adrian looked at the apartment door, thinking of Mia inside. I have too much to lose. We all do. That's the point. Vivian wiped her eyes, smearing mascara again. She looked exhausted, wrecked, furious, and somehow still impossibly determined. I'm going to move forward with this. With or without you. I'm scheduling a meeting with the city building inspector tomorrow. I'm going to show them everything I found, and if my father tries to stop me, I'll go to the press. They'll bury you. Maybe, but I have to try. Why? Why does it have to be you? Because it's my company now. My name on the buildings. My responsibility. She met his eyes. And because someone has to. If not me, then who? Adrian wanted to argue, wanted to tell her she was being naive, reckless, suicidal. But looking at her face, at the set of her jaw, and the fire in her eyes, he knew nothing he said would change her mind. Vivian had made her decision. She was going to war, and she was going to lose. When's the meeting? He asked quietly. Tomorrow at 2. Where? City Hall. Why? Because if you're going to do this, you need to do it right. You need more than just suspicions and old reports. You need proof that the building is still dangerous. You need current documentation. Vivian's eyes widened. You're saying... I'm saying I know someone who can run structural tests, quietly. Someone who owes me a favor and doesn't ask questions. He was already regretting this, already seeing all the ways it could go wrong. But you need to understand something. If we do this, if we really do this, there's no going back. Your father will come after both of us. Those men who threatened me 8 years ago. They'll come back. And this time, they won't just make threats. I know. Do you? Do you really understand what you're risking? Yes. She stepped closer. Do you? They stood there in the hallway, close enough that Adrian could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes, close enough to remember what it felt like to kiss her, to hold her, to believe they could build a life together. That had been 8 years and a lifetime ago. They were different people now, broken in different ways, carrying different scars. But maybe that didn't matter. Maybe broken people were the only ones brave enough to fight battles no one else would touch. I need to make arrangements for Mia, Adrian said. Somewhere safe. Somewhere they can't find her. I have a friend who runs a private school upstate. Very secure. Very discreet. I can. Vivian's voice was firm. Let me do this, please. Let me help keep her safe. Adrian wanted to refuse. Wanted to tell her he didn't need her money, didn't need her help. But pride was a luxury he couldn't afford anymore. Not when Mia's safety was on the line. Okay, he said, but I'm paying you back. Every cent. We can argue about that later. Vivian pulled out her phone. I'll make the call now. She can be there by tonight. Tonight? The clock is ticking, Adrian. They gave you 24 hours. We need to move fast. She was right. He hated that she was right, but she was. Adrian went back into the apartment. Mia was at the kitchen table with Mrs. Chen drawing pictures of cats. She looked up when he entered, immediately reading his face. We need to pack, he signed. Her smile disappeared. Why? You're going to go stay at a special school for a few days. A safe place. Without you? The question broke his heart. Just for a little while. I have something important I need to do. The work thing. Yes. Is it dangerous? He knelt beside her chair. Maybe. But I need you somewhere safe while I handle it. Can you be brave for me? Mia's lower lip trembled. I'm always brave. I know you are. He pulled her into a hug, memorizing the weight of her, the strawberry smell of her hair, the way her small arms wrapped around his neck. I love you so much. I love you too, Dad. She pulled back and signed, Promise you'll come get me when it's over. I promise. It was a promise he desperately hoped he could keep. 2 hours later, Mia was packed and gone, driven away in a car with tinted windows by one of Vivian's security people. Adrian had watched from Mrs. Chen's window until the car disappeared around the corner, his chest tight, his hands clenched. Sending her away felt like losing her, but keeping her here felt like painting a target on her back. Mrs. Chen touched his shoulder gently. She'll be safe. How do you know? Because you made sure of it. That's what good fathers do. Adrian nodded, not trusting his voice. Mrs. Chen squeezed his shoulder once and left him alone with his thoughts. Vivian was waiting in the hallway when he emerged. She'd changed out of her suit into jeans and a sweater, looking more like the woman he'd known 8 years ago. More human, more real. She got there safely, Vivian said, checking her phone. My friend says Mia's already made friends with the other kids. They have a deaf student program. She'll fit right in. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We still have work to do. She handed him a folder. I pulled all the original engineering reports you filed, everything you documented about the Riverside project. I need you to look through them. Tell me if anything's missing or changed. Adrian opened the folder. The reports were all there, exactly as he'd written them 8 years ago. Detailed notes about concrete compression failures, photos of improperly spaced rebar, test results showing structural weaknesses. Looking at them now was like looking at evidence from a crime scene, because that's what it was. A crime. And he'd been the only witness willing to testify until they'd scared him into silence. It's all here, he said quietly. Good. Now we need current data. Your friend who can run tests, can they do it tonight? Probably, but getting access to the building will be tricky. I own the building. I can get us in. You own... Adrian looked up sharply. The Riverside complex is yours? Cross Development owns dozens of properties. I didn't even know we had that one until I started digging today. Her jaw tightened. My father transferred it to a subsidiary company years ago. Buried it in paperwork. Almost like he was trying to hide something. Because he was. They took Vivian's car, a sleek black sedan that probably cost more than Adrian had earned in the past 5 years. She drove fast, weaving through traffic with the kind of confidence that came from never having to worry about speeding tickets. Adrian sat in the passenger seat, watching the city blur past, trying not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. His phone rang. Unknown number. His stomach dropped. "Don't answer it," Vivian said. They'll just keep calling. Let them." She glanced at him. "You're not their employee anymore. You don't owe them updates." The phone rang twice more, then stopped. A minute later, a text came through. "Wrong choice, Mr. Cole." Adrian deleted it and turned off his phone. They picked up Marcus Chen, no relation to Mrs. Chen, at a small engineering office in a part of town where the building still had character, and the rent was actually affordable. Marcus was in his 50s, built like he'd spent more time on construction sites than behind a desk, with gray stubble and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Adrian Cole," Marcus said, shaking his hand. "Haven't seen you in what, 4 years?" "5. Not since the Henderson building inspection." "Right. The one where we found all that asbestos they swore wasn't there." Marcus grinned. "Cost the developer a fortune to remediate. Good times." He turned to Vivian. "And you're the CEO who wants to tear down her own building?" "I want to know if it needs to be torn down," Vivian corrected. "There's a difference." "Fair enough." Marcus grabbed a large equipment case. "Let's go see what we're dealing with." The Riverside complex looked ordinary from the outside. 8 stories of beige concrete and tinted windows, the kind of affordable housing that filled the gaps between the luxury high-rises that were swallowing the city. There were lights on in most of the windows, families having dinner, kids doing homework, people living their lives, trusting that the walls around them were solid. Vivian used her key to access the maintenance entrance. Inside, the building felt like every other apartment complex Adrian had ever worked in. Neutral paint, industrial carpet, the faint smell of cooking and old air conditioning. Normal, safe-looking. Marcus immediately pulled out equipment. "I'll need access to the basement, the support columns. And ideally, I'd like to get into a few apartments to check the interior walls." "That could take all night," Adrian said. "Then we better get started." They worked systematically, Marcus running tests while Adrian and Vivian assisted. Concrete compression tests in the basement showed the same failures Adrian had documented 8 years ago. The rebar spacing in the support columns was still wrong. And now, 8 years later, there were cracks. Hairline fractures running through concrete that was supposed to be solid. Marcus photographed everything, took measurements, ran calculations on a tablet. His expression got grimmer with each test. "Well?" Vivian asked. "It's bad," Marcus said flatly. "Not immediate collapse bad, but bad. These cracks are stress fractures. The building is settling unevenly because the foundation work was shoddy. Give it another 5 years, maybe 10, and you're looking at serious structural failure. An earthquake could trigger it sooner. Hell, even a strong enough wind load could cause problems." "Can it be fixed?" Adrian asked. "Yeah, but it'll cost millions. You're talking about reinforcing every support column, potentially excavating and redoing the foundation work, bringing everything up to current code." Marcus shook his head. "Cheaper to evacuate the building and tear it down." "There are 240 families living here," Vivian said quietly. "Then they need to be relocated. Soon." Marcus started packing up his equipment. "I'll have a full report for you by tomorrow morning, but my professional opinion? This building should be condemned." They drove back in silence. Adrian watched the city lights stream past, thinking about all those families sleeping in apartments that could become tombs, thinking about the choice he'd made 8 years ago to walk away, thinking about how different things might have been if he'd fought harder. "Stop it," Vivian said. "Stop what?" "Blaming yourself. This isn't your fault." "I walked away." "You were threatened. You were scared. You were 24 years old." She glanced at him. "I'm not going to let you carry this alone anymore." "What are you going to do?" "Tomorrow I'm meeting with the building inspector like I planned. I'm showing them Marcus's report and the original documentation. I'm demanding a full investigation into every project my father has touched in the last 20 years. And then I'm going to the press." "Your father will destroy you." "Probably." She pulled up in front of Mrs. Chen's building. "But at least I'll go down swinging." Adrian got out of the car, then leaned back in through the window. "Thank you. For helping with Mia. For believing me about all this." "Adrian," Vivian's voice stopped him. "I never stopped loving you, even when I hated you, even when I thought you'd betrayed me. I need you to know that." He didn't know what to say to that, didn't know how to respond to 8 years of buried feelings surfacing all at once, so he just nodded and stepped back. Vivian drove away, and Adrian stood on the sidewalk watching her taillights disappear. His phone was still off. His daughter was safe in a school upstate. And tomorrow, Vivian was going to start a war that would probably destroy both of them. He should have felt terrified. And he did. But underneath the fear was something else. Something he hadn't felt in 8 years. Hope. Maybe broken people really were the only ones brave enough to fight. Maybe the truth was worth dying for after all. Maybe, just maybe, they could actually win this. Or maybe they'd both end up crushed under the weight of a corrupt system that had been rigged against them from the start. Either way, there was no backing out now. The moment Adrian had told Vivian the truth, the moment he'd helped her gather evidence, the moment he'd sent Mia away to safety, he'd chosen his side. And there was no going back. He went inside, climbed the stairs to Mrs. Chen's apartment, and knocked. She opened the door, already holding a cup of tea. "Thought you might need this," she said. Adrian took the tea and sat on her couch, the same spot where Mia had been curled against him just hours ago. The apartment felt too quiet without her. "She's really okay?" he asked. "Vivian's friend sent pictures. Look." Mrs. Chen showed him her phone. There was Mia, smiling, signing with other kids in what looked like a common room, safe, happy, far away from all this mess. "Thank you," Adrian said, "for everything." "That's what neighbors do." Mrs. Chen sat beside him. "You're doing the right thing, you know. Doesn't feel like it. The right thing rarely does. That's how you know it matters." Adrian drank his tea and tried to believe her, tried to ignore the nagging voice in his head that said he was about to get everyone he loved killed, tried to focus on the hope instead of the fear. Tomorrow, Vivian would walk into City Hall and blow up her father's empire. Tomorrow, the truth would start coming out, whether anyone was ready for it or not. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, Adrian sat in a quiet apartment and drank tea and tried to remember what it felt like to be the person who'd cared enough about strangers to risk everything. That person was still in there somewhere, buried under 8 years of fear and survival and compromise. But maybe, with Vivian's help, he could find that person again. Maybe it wasn't too late to be the father Mia deserved, the man Vivian had believed him to be. The engineer who'd once thought the truth mattered more than safety. Maybe there was still time to make things right. His phone buzzed. He'd turned it back on without thinking. Another text from the unknown number. "Last warning. Walk away or everyone you love pays the price." Adrian read the message twice, then did something he hadn't done in 8 years. He replied, "No." 1 word, 2 letters. A complete reversal of every choice he'd made since that night in the parking garage, when 2 men in suits had shown him pictures and made promises they'd absolutely keep. He hit send before he could change his mind. 3 dots appeared immediately. Someone was typing. Adrian waited, his heart pounding, wondering if this was the moment everything fell apart, or the moment it finally started coming together. The reply came through. "You'll regret this." Maybe he would. Probably he would, but at least he'd regret trying instead of hiding. At least Mia would grow up knowing her father had fought for something that mattered, even if he lost. At least he'd finally stopped running. Adrian didn't sleep. He sat in Mrs. Chen's living room watching the clock tick toward morning, his phone silent now, the threats hanging in the air like smoke he couldn't clear. At 5 a.m., he gave up pretending and made coffee that tasted like burnt regret. His phone rang at 6:30. "Vivian." "They broke into my apartment," she said without preamble. Her voice was steady, but he could hear the tremor underneath. "Last night, while I was out, they didn't take anything, just left a message on my bathroom mirror. In lipstick." "What did it say?" "Stop or we'll make you." Adrian's hand tightened on the phone. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine. I wasn't home." "But Adrian, they were inside my apartment. They knew where I keep my makeup. Her voice cracked slightly. "They went through my things." "Where are you now?" "Hotel. I'm not going back there until this is over." A pause. "The meeting's still happening. 2 o'clock, City Hall. I'm not backing down." "I know you're not." "Will you be there?" Adrian looked around Mrs. Chen's apartment, at the worn furniture and family photos, and the drawing Mia had left on the fridge showing the 2 of them holding hands under a smiling sun. Everything he'd built in 8 years of hiding, everything he stood to lose. "Yeah," he said, "I'll be there." He hung up and found Mrs. Chen standing in the kitchen doorway, already dressed, holding 2 mugs of tea. You look terrible, she said. I feel worse. Good. That means you're taking this seriously. She handed him the tea. What do you need? A miracle, probably. Fresh out of those. How about breakfast instead? They sat at her small kitchen table and ate eggs that tasted like cardboard because Adrian's stomach was too knotted to appreciate food. Mrs. Chen didn't push him to talk, just sat across from him, being present in that way she had, reminding him he wasn't completely alone. I called in sick to work, Adrian said finally. First time in 3 years. About time you took a day off. I might not have a job to go back to after this. Then you'll find another one. You're good at fixing things. People always need things fixed. She reached across the table and squeezed his hand. And if you need a place to stay while you figure it out, you've got one. Adrian felt something loosen in his chest. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You still have to survive today first. At 11 a.m., Adrian's phone rang again. Marcus Chen, the engineer. I've got the full report, Marcus said. And Adrian, it's worse than I thought. I ran the numbers overnight. That building isn't just unsafe. It's a catastrophe waiting to happen. The stress fractures in the support columns have compromised the structural integrity on floors 3 through 7. There's evidence of water infiltration in the foundation that's been eating away at the concrete for years. And the rebar corrosion, how long does it have? Hard to say. Could it be 5 years? Could be 5 months. One good seismic event and the whole thing could pancake. Marcus's voice was grim. Those families need to be evacuated immediately, like yesterday. Can you be at City Hall at 2? We need you to present this to the building inspector. Already planning on it. I've contacted the structural engineering board too. They'll want to launch their own investigation. Good. That's good. Adrian, Marcus paused. You know this is going to get ugly, right? Whoever signed off on that building originally, whoever covered this up, they're going to fight back hard. You ready for that? No, but I'm doing it anyway. That's the Adrian I remember. Marcus hung up. Adrian spent the next 2 hours digging through old files on his laptop, pulling together every piece of documentation he'd kept from 8 years ago. He'd told himself he was saving them as insurance, but really, he'd just never been able to let go. Photos of failed concrete tests, emails from supervisors telling him to drop it, notes from meetings where he'd been told his concerns were unfounded. Everything that proved he'd tried to stop this before it happened. At 1:30, he took the subway to City Hall. The train was crowded with people living ordinary lives, checking phones and reading books and complaining about their ordinary problems. Adrian envied them. He wanted to be bored by his commute again. Wanted his biggest worry to be whether Mia remembered her lunch. Vivian was waiting outside City Hall wearing a different suit, navy blue this time, severe and professional. She'd pulled her hair back so tight it looked painful. Armor, Adrian realized. She was wearing armor made of expensive fabric and perfect makeup because she didn't have anything else to protect herself with. You came, she said. I said I would. People say a lot of things. She studied his face. You look awful. You look terrified. I am terrified. She glanced up at the building. My father's lawyer called this morning. Threatened to have me removed as CEO if I go forward with this. Said I'm acting erratically, that I'm emotionally compromised, that I'm destroying the company over a personal vendetta. Are you? Maybe a little. She almost smiled. But mostly I'm just trying to do the right thing for once in my life. Marcus arrived carrying a briefcase full of equipment and documentation. Behind him came someone Adrian didn't recognize. A woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and an expression that suggested she'd seen every kind of construction fraud imaginable and wasn't impressed by any of it. This is Sarah Brennan, Marcus said, Chief Structural Engineer for the city. I sent her my preliminary findings this morning. She wanted to be here. Ms. Cross, Sarah said, shaking Vivian's hand, I've been reviewing the Riverside project files, or trying to. Large portions of the documentation seem to be missing from city records. That's convenient, Adrian muttered. Isn't it? Sarah's eyes were sharp. Which is why I'm very interested in seeing whatever evidence you've managed to compile. Shall we? The meeting was in a conference room on the 3rd floor, institutional and cold, with fluorescent lights that made everyone look slightly dead. The building inspector was already there, a tired-looking man named Robert Hayes who seemed like he wanted to be anywhere else. With him was a city attorney, a woman who introduced herself as Jennifer Park, and immediately started taking notes like she expected to be building a legal case. And then Vivian's father walked in. Richard Cross looked exactly like Adrian remembered. Tall, distinguished, silver hair perfectly styled, wearing a suit that probably cost more than a car. He had the kind of face people trusted instinctively, strong jaw, clear eyes, the appearance of someone who'd built an empire through hard work and integrity. It was a lie, but it was a convincing one. "Vivian," Richard said, his voice warm but edged with warning, "I'm disappointed you felt the need to bring this matter to city officials before discussing it with me first." "I tried discussing it with you 8 years ago," Vivian said quietly, "when Adrian first brought the safety concerns to my attention. You told me he was lying. You told me he was trying to sabotage the project. Because that's what I believed at the time. Was it?" She opened her folder and slid a document across the table. "This is an email from you to the project manager dated 3 days after Adrian filed his initial safety report. You explicitly told him to handle the coal situation quietly and to make sure the inspector signs off regardless of any outstanding concerns. That doesn't sound like someone who believed Adrian was lying. That sounds like someone orchestrating a cover-up." Richard's expression didn't change. "That email is taken out of context." "Then provide the context." "Vivian, you're being manipulated by a man who has a personal grudge against our family. Adrian Cole disappeared 8 years ago, and now he's back, filling your head with conspiracy theories." "I have structural engineering reports from last night," Vivian interrupted. "Current documentation showing the Riverside building has critical safety failures. Marcus Chen is here to present his findings, and Ms. Brennan from the City Engineering Office has agreed to review all the evidence. So please, Dad, tell me again how this is just a personal grudge." Richard's eyes flicked to Adrian for the first time. The temperature in the room dropped about 10 degrees. "Mr. Cole, I was under the impression you'd left the city permanently." "I came back," Adrian said, "clearly. And now you're poisoning my daughter against me with lies about a project that was completed safely 8 years ago." "It wasn't completed safely. You know it wasn't, you knew it then, and you know it now. That's a serious accusation." "It's the truth." "Gentlemen," Robert Hayes interrupted, "perhaps we should focus on the actual evidence. Ms. Cross, you said you have structural reports." Marcus stepped forward and opened his briefcase. For the next 40 minutes, he walked through his findings methodically. The failed concrete tests, the corroded rebar, the stress fractures, the water damage, the calculations showing the building was experiencing uneven settlement that would eventually lead to catastrophic failure. He showed photographs, diagrams, test results. Everything documented in excruciating detail. Sarah Brennan listened intently, asking technical questions that Marcus answered without hesitation. Robert Hayes looked progressively more uncomfortable. Jennifer Park kept taking notes. And Richard Cross sat perfectly still, his expression never wavering from polite attention. When Marcus finished, Vivian pulled out Adrian's original reports from 8 years ago. "These are the initial safety concerns that were raised during construction," she said, "documented by Adrian Cole, who was working as a quality assurance consultant for the engineering firm. Every issue he identified 8 years ago, every single one, is still present in the building today, which means either his reports were ignored or someone actively chose to proceed with construction knowing the building wasn't safe. Or his reports were wrong," Richard said calmly. "Engineering assessments can be mistaken. That's why we have multiple rounds of inspection." "Who signed off on those inspections?" Sarah Brennan asked. Robert Hayes flipped through his file. "The chief inspector at the time was Thomas Whitfield." "Your college roommate," Vivian said to her father, "who retired 6 months after the Riverside project was completed with a severance package twice the normal amount. Tom was a dedicated public servant for 30 years. He earned that retirement. He earned it by signing off on a building that should never have been approved." Vivian's voice was rising now, 8 years of buried anger finally breaking through. "You paid him off. You paid him to ignore the safety violations and approve the project. And when Adrian threatened to expose it, you had him threatened and blacklisted and forced to disappear. That's a fantasy, is it? Because I have phone records showing calls between your personal cell and Tom Whitfield's number the same week Adrian filed his safety report. I have bank statements showing a wire transfer from a cross-development subsidiary account to Tom's personal account 3 days later. I have testimony from Adrian about the men who came to his apartment and made specific threats against both of us. So please, Dad, keep telling me this is all in my imagination. The room went silent. Richard looked at his daughter with something that might have been disappointment or might have been calculation. It was hard to tell with men like him. You're making a mistake, Richard said quietly. A very serious mistake. No. You made the mistake 8 years ago. I'm just finally cleaning it up. You have no idea what you're doing. The legal implications alone, I don't care about the legal implications. I care about the 240 families living in a building that could collapse at any moment. Vivian stood up, her hands flat on the table. I'm formally requesting that the city conduct an immediate safety inspection of the Riverside complex. I'm also requesting a full investigation into every project Cross Development has completed in the last 20 years. And I'm prepared to testify under oath about everything I've discovered. Robert Hayes looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. Ms. Cross, that's a very serious request. The legal ramifications for your company, I understand the ramifications, do it anyway. Vivian, Richard said, his voice hardening, think very carefully about what you're doing. Once you start this process, there's no taking it back. You'll destroy everything I've built, everything we've built together. You built it on lies, on fraud, on putting people's lives at risk. Her voice broke slightly. You let me believe Adrian abandoned me. You let me hate him for 8 years when all he was trying to do was save lives. How am I supposed to just ignore that? Because he's nobody. Richard's mask slipped for just a second, revealing something cold underneath. He was a junior engineer with no connections and no future. You are a Cross. You don't throw away your legacy for people like him. People like him? Vivian's voice went dangerously quiet. You mean people with integrity? People who care more about doing the right thing than protecting their fortunes. You're right, Dad. I'm nothing like him, but maybe I should be. Richard stood up slowly. If you proceed with this, you'll be removed as CEO. The board will vote you out within a week. Let them try. They won't just try. They'll succeed. I still control 40% of the company. I have allies on the board. You'll have nothing. I'll have the truth. That's more than you've ever had. Father and daughter stared at each other across the table, 8 years of lies and manipulation and buried love sitting between them like a third person. Adrian watched this unfold and felt something break in Vivian's expression, the final severing of a bond that had been fraying for years. I'm sorry it came to this, Vivian said softly, but I'm not sorry for doing it. Richard picked up his briefcase. You'll regret this decision for the rest of your life. Probably. But at least I'll be able to look at myself in the mirror. Richard walked out without another word. The door closed behind him with a quiet click that somehow sounded final. Robert Hayes cleared his throat. Well, this is unprecedented. Can you launch the investigation? Vivian asked. She sounded exhausted now, drained, like standing up to her father had cost her everything she had left. Based on what I've heard today, I don't have a choice. Hayes looked at Sarah Brennan. Ms. Brennan, can your office coordinate the structural inspection? Absolutely. I'll have a team at the Riverside building tomorrow morning. Sarah looked at Vivian. Ms. Cross, I want to be clear about what happens next. If our inspection confirms Mr. Chen's findings, we'll need to evacuate the building immediately. That's 240 families who'll need emergency housing. The city can help coordinate, but it's going to be expensive and complicated. I'll handle the relocation costs, Vivian said immediately. Whatever it takes, just get those families somewhere safe. That's admirable, but it could run into the millions. I don't care what it costs. Sarah nodded. All right then. We'll move forward with the investigation. Mr. Cole, we'll need your full cooperation. Your original documentation will be crucial evidence. Whatever you need, Adrian said. Jennifer Park, the city attorney, finally spoke up. Ms. Cross, I should inform you that if this investigation reveals criminal wrongdoing, fraud, bribery, endangerment, there will likely be criminal charges filed against your father, possibly against other executives at Cross Development. You could be called as a witness in criminal proceedings. I understand. You could also face civil lawsuits from the families affected, class action suits. The company could be liable for millions, possibly billions in damages. I understand, Vivian repeated. Do it anyway. The meeting ended with handshakes and promises of follow-up communication. Marcus packed up his equipment. Sarah Brennan scheduled the inspection. Robert Hayes looked relieved to escape. Jennifer Park took everyone's contact information with the efficiency of someone already building a case file. Adrian and Vivian walked out of City Hall together into afternoon sunlight that felt wrong somehow, too bright for the day they'd just had. Vivian stood on the steps looking out at the city like she was seeing it for the first time. "I just destroyed my relationship with my father," she said quietly. "Yeah. And probably my career. Probably. And I'm about to spend the next several years in legal battles and investigations and probably bankruptcy proceedings. Most likely." She turned to look at him. "So why don't I feel worse about it?" "Because you did the right thing, finally." "The right thing feels terrible. Usually does." Adrian sat down on the steps. His legs felt like they might give out. "For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. That took guts." Vivian sat beside him. "I couldn't have done it without you." "Sure you could. You're the one who dug up all the evidence. You're the one who stood up to your father. I just showed up." "You did more than show up. You told me the truth 8 years ago when no one else would. You tried to save those families, and when I needed help gathering evidence, you risked everything to help me." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "I spent 8 years hating you for leaving, and now I understand you never really left at all. You just went somewhere I couldn't follow." Adrian didn't know what to say to that. They sat there in silence while the city moved around them, people rushing past on ordinary errands, oblivious to the fact that a bomb had just been detonated in a conference room 3 floors above them. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You made a very big mistake today, Mr. Cole. Both of you did." Adrian showed Vivian the message. She read it and laughed, sharp and humorless. "Let them come," she said. "I'm done being scared." "You should be scared. These people are dangerous." "I know, but I'm also the majority shareholder in a multi-billion-dollar company. I have resources. I have lawyers. I have—" She stopped. "I have you. If you'll stay." "Vivian, I know it's not fair to ask. I know you have Mia to think about. But Adrian, I can't do this alone. I need someone I can trust, someone who knows the full story, someone who won't run when things get hard." She lifted her head to look at him. "Please don't disappear again." Adrian thought about Mia, safe in her school upstate. Thought about the threats, the danger, the very real possibility that staying meant getting hurt or worse. Thought about all the reasons he should say no, should go back to his maintenance job and his small life and his careful invisibility. But he also thought about those families in the Riverside building, about the children sleeping in bedrooms held up by failing concrete, about the choice he'd made 8 years ago to walk away and how that choice had haunted him every single day since. "I'll stay," he said. "But not just for you, for them, for the families who deserve to know they're not safe, for everyone your father put at risk to protect his bottom line. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We still have to survive what comes next." What came next arrived faster than expected. Adrian's phone rang 20 minutes later. Mrs. Chen, her voice tight with fear. "Adrian, there are men outside my building, 2 of them. Suits. They knocked on my door asking for you. I didn't answer, but I can see them through the peephole. They're just standing there, waiting." Adrian was already moving, pulling Vivian to her feet. "Get inside. Lock your door. Don't open it for anyone. I'm calling the police." "They haven't done anything illegal. They're just standing in the hallway." "Then call the police anyway. Tell them you feel threatened. Tell them whatever you need to tell them. Just get someone there." He hung up and turned to Vivian. "They're at Mrs. Chen's apartment. They know where I've been staying." "We need to go." "No. You need to go somewhere safe, hotel, friend's house, anywhere but your apartment or your office. They've already shown they can get to you there." "What about you?" "I'll handle it." "Adrian, Vivian, please, just this once, let me handle it. Go somewhere safe and I'll call you as soon as I can." She looked like she wanted to argue, but something in his expression stopped her. She nodded and pulled out her phone, already calling for a car. Adrian took the subway back across town, his mind racing. The men at Mrs. Chen's building were a message, a reminder that they could reach him anytime they wanted. That sending Mia away didn't make her safe, it just made her farther away when they decided to make good on their threats. By the time he got to the building, the police were already there. 2 uniformed officers talking to Mrs. Chen in the hallway. The men in suits were gone. "Mr. Cole?" One of the officers turned as Adrian approached. Miss Chen says you might know something about two men who were loitering in the hallway. They work for Cross Development, Adrian said. They've been threatening me to keep quiet about safety violations in one of their buildings. Today I testified to the city about those violations. This is retaliation. The officer's expression shifted from bored to interested. You want to file a report? Yes. He spent the next hour giving a statement, laying out everything. The threats 8 years ago, the phone calls yesterday, the break-in at Vivian's apartment, the text messages, the men showing up at Mrs. Chen's building. All of it documented, official, on record. It wouldn't stop them. Adrian knew that. Men like Richard Cross didn't get stopped by police reports. But it was something, a paper trail. Evidence that if anything happened to him or Vivian or Mia, there would be a very clear place to start looking. When the police finally left, Mrs. Chen made him sit down and drink tea he didn't want. You can't stay here, she said. I know. And you can't go to your own apartment. They probably know where that is too. I know. So where will you go? Adrian didn't have an answer. He'd spent 8 years building a life so small and invisible that he'd never bothered making backup plans, never cultivated friends beyond Mrs. Chen, never saved enough money for emergencies, never prepared for the possibility that his past would catch up with him. His phone rang. Vivian. Are you okay? She asked immediately. Fine. The police took a report. The men were gone by the time I got here. Adrian, I've been thinking, this isn't sustainable. We can't just keep reacting to their threats. We need to go on offense. What do you mean? I mean, I'm calling a press conference tomorrow morning. I'm going to tell the entire city what my father did. The cover-up, the bribes, the threats, all of it. Once it's public, there's no point in them coming after us anymore. The damage will already be done. Vivian, that's insane. My father will do what he always does. He'll deny everything. He'll hire expensive lawyers. He'll try to spin it as a family dispute. But the truth will be out there, and the city will have to act on it whether he likes it or not. You'll be destroyed. I'm already being destroyed. At least this way I control the narrative. Her voice was firm now, decided. I'm doing this, Adrian, with or without you, but I'd rather have you standing next to me when I do. Adrian looked around Mrs. Chen's small apartment, at the life he'd built on hiding and fear and compromise. He thought about Mia, who deserved a father who stood up for things that mattered. He thought about those families in the Riverside building who deserved to know the truth. What time's the press conference? He asked. 10 a.m., City Hall steps. I'll be there. Thank you. She paused. Where are you staying tonight? I don't know yet. Stay with me. I'm at the Lexington Hotel under a fake name, room 1247. Come over. We can prep for tomorrow together. It was a terrible idea for about 15 different reasons, but Adrian was tired of making the safe choice. Okay, he said. Give me an hour. He packed a bag at his apartment, just the essentials, enough for a few days. The place felt alien now, like it belonged to someone else. The maintenance worker who kept his head down and didn't make waves. That person was gone. Maybe he'd been gone for a while and Adrian just hadn't noticed. The hotel was exactly the kind of place someone like Vivian would choose. Expensive, discreet, the kind of lobby where the staff was trained not to remember faces. Adrian gave a fake name at the desk and took the elevator to the 12th floor. Vivian answered the door in jeans and a t-shirt, her hair down for the first time since he'd seen her on that elevator. She looked younger like this, more like the woman he'd known 8 years ago. Come in, she said. The suite was massive, living room, bedroom, probably a bathroom bigger than Adrian's entire apartment. There were documents spread across the coffee table, her laptop open, notes everywhere. She'd been working. I ordered room service, Vivian said. Hope you're hungry. They ate dinner sitting on the floor surrounded by paperwork, building the case she'd present to the press tomorrow. Adrian walked her through the technical details of the structural failures, helped her translate the engineering jargon into language normal people could understand. Vivian showed him the financial records she'd compiled, the pattern of bribes and payoffs and suspicious transactions. Somewhere around midnight, they'd built something that looked like truth. Messy, complicated, damning truth. This is going to ruin us both, Vivian said quietly. Probably. Are you scared? Terrified. Me too. She leaned back against the couch. But I'm also more sure about this than I've been about anything in years. Does that make sense? Yeah, it does. They sat there in comfortable silence. Two people who'd lost 8 years to fear and lies and other people's threats. Finally, on the same side again. I never stopped loving you, Vivian said suddenly. I said that yesterday, but I don't think you heard me. Or you heard me, but you didn't believe me. So I'm saying it again. I never stopped. Even when I hated you, even when I thought you'd betrayed me. Some part of me was always waiting for you to come back and explain, to tell me it wasn't what I thought. And now you have, and I just... She stopped, searching for words. I needed you to know that. Adrian set down his water glass carefully. I don't know what you want me to say to that. You don't have to say anything. I just needed to tell you. Vivian, I have a daughter. My life is complicated. I'm not the person you remember. I know, and I'm not who you remember either. We're both different now, harder, more damaged, more real. She shifted to face him. But maybe that's better. Maybe we needed a break before we could be honest with each other. Or maybe we're just two broken people making bad decisions. Maybe. But I'd rather make bad decisions with you than safe ones alone. Adrian looked at her. Really looked at her. The woman who'd stood up to her father, who'd chosen truth over fortune, who was about to throw away everything she'd built for people she'd never met. She was magnificent and terrifying and absolutely going to get them both killed. He kissed her. It wasn't planned, wasn't smart, wasn't any of the things it should have been. But her hands were in his hair and his arms were around her waist. And for one perfect moment, 8 years of distance disappeared like it had never existed. They broke apart, breathing hard. We shouldn't do this, Adrian said. I know. We have a press conference in 10 hours. I know. And 100 reasons why this is a terrible idea. I know. Vivian kissed him again. I don't care. Neither did he. Not anymore. Not tonight. Tomorrow they'd face the cameras and the questions and Richard Cross's fury. Tomorrow they'd start a war they might not survive. But tonight they could pretend they were just two people who'd found their way back to each other against impossible odds. Tomorrow would come soon enough. But for now, they had this. Adrian woke at dawn to the sound of his phone vibrating against the nightstand. For a confused moment, he didn't remember where he was. The sheets were too expensive, the room too quiet, everything wrong. Then he felt Vivian's weight against his side, her breathing slow and steady, and the last 8 hours came rushing back. The phone kept buzzing. He reached for it carefully, trying not to wake her. Marcus Chen, calling at 6 a.m. Adrian slipped out of bed and moved to the living room before answering. Marcus? Turn on the news. Marcus's voice was tight. Channel 7, now. Adrian found the remote and clicked on the TV. The morning news anchor was mid-sentence, talking over footage of the Riverside building. Evacuation began early this morning after an emergency structural inspection revealed critical safety failures in the 8-story residential complex. City officials say approximately 240 families are being relocated to temporary housing while engineers assess the extent of the damage. This is a developing story, and we're expecting an official statement from Cross Development within the hour. The camera cut to footage of families streaming out of the building in the pre-dawn darkness, carrying hastily packed bags, children crying, elderly residents being helped downstairs by firefighters. The kind of chaos that looked like disaster, even when it was actually rescue. They moved up the inspection, Adrian said. Sarah Brennan called me at 4 a.m., Marcus said they couldn't wait until morning. She'd been reviewing my report and got more concerned the longer she looked at it. So she pulled together an emergency team, got a judge to sign off on immediate access, and went in at 5. Adrian, it's worse than I thought. They found active cracking in 3 of the main support columns. The building was literally days away from catastrophic failure. Adrian sank onto the couch. Days? Maybe a week at most. Sarah said if there'd been any kind of seismic activity, even a small tremor, the whole thing could have pancaked. Those families... Marcus's voice cracked. We got them out just in time. Behind him, Adrian heard Vivian emerge from the bedroom. She was wearing his shirt, her hair tangled, looking at the TV with growing horror. Oh no, she whispered. I'll call you back, Adrian told Marcus and hung up. They stood together watching the news footage. A reporter was interviewing a woman holding a crying toddler, asking her how she felt about being evacuated in the middle of the night. I'm just grateful we're safe, the woman said, but her voice was shaking. They told us the building wasn't stable, that it could collapse. I've been living there for 3 years. My children have been sleeping in that building for 3 years. How did this happen? The camera cut back to the anchor. Cross Development, the company that built the Riverside complex, has not yet responded to requests for comment. However, sources close to the investigation suggest this may be part of a larger pattern of safety violations across multiple cross-development projects. We'll continue to follow this story as it develops. Vivian's phone started ringing, then Adrian's, then Vivian's again. The news was out, the evacuation was happening, and now everyone wanted answers. The press conference, Vivian said, still staring at the screen. We need to move it up. We need to get ahead of this before my father's lawyers start spinning the narrative. It's 6 a.m. I don't care. Call every reporter whose number you have. Tell them press conference at City Hall in 2 hours. Tell them the CEO of Cross Development will be making a statement about the Riverside evacuation and systemic safety failures across the company. Adrian started to argue, then stopped. She was right. The story was breaking with or without them. Better to control how it broke. They spent the next hour making calls, getting dressed, running through what Vivian would say. By 7:30, they were in a car heading to City Hall. By 8, a crowd had already gathered on the steps. Reporters, cameras, curious onlookers who'd seen the evacuation footage and wanted answers. Sarah Brennan was there, looking exhausted but determined. Marcus stood beside her with his briefcase full of evidence. Robert Hayes, the building inspector, looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. And off to the side, watching everything with cold calculation, was a man Adrian recognized, one of Richard Cross's senior attorneys. They're already here, Adrian muttered. Good, Vivian said. Let them watch me burn it all down. She walked up to the microphone that someone had set up, smoothed her jacket, and waited for the cameras to focus. The crowd quieted. Adrian stood off to the side where he could see her face, see the moment she made the choice to step off the cliff and hope she'd learn to fly on the way down. Good morning, Vivian said. Her voice was steady, clear, amplified across the plaza. My name is Vivian Cross, and I'm the CEO of Cross Development. I'm here today to take full responsibility for the safety failures that led to this morning's emergency evacuation of the Riverside residential complex. A murmur ran through the crowd. Cameras clicked. 8 years ago, Vivian continued, during the construction of that building, serious structural concerns were raised by a quality assurance consultant named Adrian Cole. Mr. Cole documented multiple code violations, failed concrete tests, and improper construction techniques that made the building unsafe for occupancy. He attempted to report these violations to city inspectors. In response, he was threatened, blacklisted from his profession, and forced to disappear to protect himself and people he loved. The murmuring got louder. Adrian saw Richard Cross's attorney pull out his phone, already making calls. The violations Mr. Cole identified were real, Vivian said. They were documented. They were serious. And they were covered up by executives at Cross Development, including my father, Richard Cross, who was CEO at the time. City inspectors were paid to sign off on unsafe construction. Safety reports were falsified, and 240 families moved into a building that was compromised from the day it was completed. A reporter shouted a question. Vivian ignored it and kept going. This morning, emergency structural inspections revealed that the Riverside building is in imminent danger of collapse. The families who live there are safe now, but only because engineers worked through the night to evacuate them. If we had waited even a few more days, her voice caught. She paused, collected herself. Those families trusted us. They trusted Cross Development to build them safe homes. We betrayed that trust. My father betrayed that trust. And I am here today to tell you that it wasn't an isolated incident. She pulled out a folder, held it up so the cameras could see. I have documentation of at least 6 other cross-development projects with similar patterns of safety violations, falsified inspections, and payoffs to city officials. I am turning all of this evidence over to the city attorney's office and requesting a full criminal investigation into my father's conduct and the conduct of everyone who helped him cover up these violations. The plaza erupted, reporters shouting questions, cameras flashing, the lawyer on his phone practically screaming into it. Vivian raised her voice to be heard over the chaos. I am also announcing my resignation as CEO of Cross Development, effective immediately. I cannot in good conscience continue to lead a company built on fraud and corruption. However, before I step down, I am using my authority as majority shareholder to authorize full cooperation with all city, state, and federal investigations. Every file will be opened, every record will be made available, and every family affected by our negligence will be compensated fully.
Ms. Cross, a reporter pushed forward, are you saying your father committed crimes? I'm saying the evidence suggests criminal wrongdoing, and I'm asking law enforcement to investigate fully. I'm also asking that the focus remain on the families who were put at risk, not on my family's internal conflicts. Did you know about these violations when you took over as CEO? No, I discovered them recently with Mr. Cole's help. As soon as I understood the scope of the problem, I took action.
Where is your father now?
I don't know.
Will you testify against him? If asked, yes, absolutely. More shouting, more questions. Vivian held up her hand. I know you have more questions. I'll be available for follow-up interviews. But right now, my priority is making sure every family displaced by this morning's evacuation has safe housing and that we begin the process of identifying any other buildings that may be at risk. Thank you. She stepped away from the microphone. Reporters surged forward, but security held them back. Adrian met her at the edge of the plaza, and they moved quickly toward a waiting car, cameras following them every step. They made it inside before the crowd could swarm them. The driver pulled away smoothly, navigating through streets that were starting to fill with morning traffic. Vivian sat very still, staring straight ahead. Her hands were shaking. You did good, Adrian said quietly.
I just destroyed my father's life's work.
You just saved lives he was willing to risk.
Both things are true. She finally looked at him. I don't feel good about it. Is that wrong? No, it means you're human. Her phone rang. She looked at the screen and went pale. It's him. Your father? She nodded but didn't answer. Let it ring through to voicemail. Immediately it started ringing again. You should answer, Adrian said. Get it over with. Vivian took a breath and picked up. Dad. Adrian couldn't hear what Richard was saying, but he could see Vivian's face going through a series of expressions: pain, anger, guilt, resolve. I know what I did, she said finally, and I'd do it again. Those families deserve to know the truth. They deserve to be safe. And you took that from them to protect your bottom line. More shouting from the other end. I don't care about the company. I don't care about the stock price. I don't care about your reputation. Her voice was rising now. I care about the fact that you knew that building was unsafe and you let people live there anyway. I care that you threatened Adrian to keep him quiet. I care that you've been doing this for years and nobody stopped you because you were too powerful and too connected and too... She stopped, listened. No, she said quietly. You don't get to play the victim here. You made choices, criminal choices. And now you have to live with the consequences. Just like Adrian had to live with the consequences of trying to do the right thing. Just like those families have to live with the consequences of trusting your company. She hung up, immediately blocked the number, sat there breathing hard. What did he say? Adrian asked. That I've ruined him, that I've destroyed everything he built, that I'll regret this for the rest of my life. She wiped her eyes angrily. And that I'm not his daughter anymore. Adrian wanted to say something comforting, something wise, something that would make the pain in her face go away. But there was nothing to say. She'd made her choice. So had her father. And now they both had to live with it. Where do you want to go? The driver asked. I don't know, Vivian said. I don't have an office anymore. I don't have a company. I don't... She stopped. Can we just drive? Just for a while? They drove through the city as the morning sun climbed higher, past the buildings Richard Cross had built, past the tower where Adrian had been working maintenance when this whole thing started, past ordinary people living ordinary lives who had no idea how close some of them had been to disaster. Adrian's phone rang. Mrs. Chen. Adrian, I just saw the news. Are you all right? I'm fine. We're both fine. That was very brave, what that young woman did, taking on her own father like that. Yeah, it was. Will you be safe now? Are those men going to leave you alone? Adrian hadn't thought about that. The threats had been to keep them quiet, to prevent them from exposing the truth. But the truth was out now. The damage was done. There was no point in threatening them anymore. I think so, he said. I think we're safe now. Good. Then you should go get your daughter. She needs to see her father. She was right. Mia had been gone for 2 days. She was probably scared, probably confused, definitely missing him. Can you take me upstate? Adrian asked the driver. To Ashford Academy? The driver nodded and changed course. Vivian leaned against him, exhausted. I should come with you. I want to meet her properly, not just a quick introduction in a hallway. Are you sure? It's been a long day already. I'm sure. They drove north out of the city, watching it shrink in the rearview mirror until it was just a smudge of buildings on the horizon. The school was 2 hours away, set back from the road in rolling hills that looked too peaceful for the day they'd had. Mia was in the common room when they arrived, playing a card game with 3 other kids. She looked up when Adrian walked in and her whole face transformed. She ran across the room and threw herself into his arms, nearly knocking him over. He held her tight, breathing in strawberry shampoo and feeling the tension of the last 2 days start to ease. She was safe. She was here. Nothing else mattered as much as that. She pulled back and signed rapidly. You're okay. You promised you'd come back and you did. I always keep my promises, he signed back. She noticed Vivian standing behind him and waved shyly. Vivian knelt down and signed. Hello again. I'm glad to meet you properly this time. Mia's eyes went wide. She looked at Adrian. She learned more signs? I've been practicing, Vivian signed. The movements were still awkward, still clearly new, but Mia didn't care. She was grinning like Vivian had just performed magic. Are you my dad's girlfriend? Mia signed. Adrian felt heat rise to his face. Vivian laughed and signed back. I'm your dad's friend. Is that okay? I guess. Mia studied Vivian with that serious expression she got when she was making important decisions. Do you like cats? I love cats. Okay. You can be his friend. Mia turned back to Adrian. Can I come home now? I miss Mrs. Chen and my room and my stuff. Yes. We're taking you home. Is the work thing over? Yes. It's over. She hugged him again, satisfied. Adrian gathered her things while Mia said goodbye to her new friends and the teachers who'd been looking after her. The whole time he kept glancing at Vivian, who was standing off to the side with her hands in her pockets, looking lost in a way that made his chest hurt. She'd given up everything today. Her company, her father, her entire identity. And for what? For truth. For strangers. For a principle most people didn't even believe in anymore. She was the most remarkable person he'd ever met, and he had no idea how to tell her that. They drove back toward the city with Mia between them in the back seat, signing about the school and the other kids and the food, which was good but not as good as Adrian's cooking. Vivian watched this conversation with fascination, occasionally asking Adrian to translate when Mia's signs moved too fast. She's amazing, Vivian said quietly, while Mia was distracted by something out the window. She is, Adrian agreed. She's the only good thing I've managed to do in the last 8 years. That's not true. Isn't it? I walked away from my career. I hid in basements fixing pipes. I let guilty people get away with crimes because I was too scared to fight back. You protected your daughter. You survived. And when it mattered, when I needed help exposing the truth, you helped me. That counts for something. Does it? Because right now it feels like we've just blown up both our lives for principles that nobody else cares about. I care, Vivian said firmly. Those families care. The truth matters, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Adrian wanted to believe her. Wanted to believe that today had been worth it. That they'd accomplished something meaningful. That the wreckage they'd left behind would somehow become something better. But mostly, he was just tired. They dropped Vivian at her hotel first. She got out slowly, looking at Adrian like she wanted to say something important but couldn't find the words. Call me tomorrow, she said finally. Yeah, tomorrow. She leaned back in and signed to Mia. It was nice to meet you. I hope I see you again soon. Mia signed back. You should come have dinner with us sometime. My dad makes really good spaghetti. Vivian's eyes got suspiciously bright. I would love that. Then she was gone, walking into the hotel lobby alone, and Adrian felt the absence of her like a missing tooth, something that should be there but wasn't. Mrs. Chen was waiting when they got home, and she swept Mia up in a hug that lasted a full minute.
Then she made them all tea and listened while Adrian explained everything that had happened, translating for Mia when necessary. "So it's really over?" Mrs. Chen asked. "The threats, the danger, all of it?"
"I think so. The truth is out. There's nothing left to hide. And what happens now? To you? To the company?
To Vivian's father? Criminal investigations, lawsuits, probably prison for Richard Cross and whoever else was involved in the cover-up. The company will probably get torn apart. Vivian resigned, so she's out of it now. But she'll probably get called to testify. And you?
I don't know."
Adrian looked at Mia, who was drawing at the kitchen table, content now that she was home and safe and her world had stopped spinning. "I need to find a new job. Probably not with Cross Development anymore." "Probably not," Mrs. Chen agreed with a slight smile. "But you're a talented man, Adrian. You'll land on your feet." He wished he had her confidence. That night, after Mia was asleep, Adrian sat in his small apartment, his real apartment, not Mrs. Chen's, not a hotel room, and tried to process everything that had happened in the last 72 hours. 3 days ago, he'd been invisible, safe, small. And now he was all over the news, his name attached to the biggest construction scandal in years, his face on every channel. His phone buzzed. A text from Vivian. "Can't sleep. Keep thinking about everything that happened today." He typed back, "Me too."
"Did we do the right thing?" "Yes. Then why does it feel so terrible? Because right and easy are usually different things." A pause. Then, "Thank you for being there today, for standing with me. I couldn't have done it alone." "Yes, you could have, but I'm glad I was there anyway." Another pause. Longer this time.
"Adrian, I meant what I said in the hallway yesterday. About never stopping loving you. I know the timing is terrible, and everything is a mess, and we both have a lot to figure out. But I need you to know that. I need you to know that 8 years didn't change how I feel. It just made me understand what I was feeling better." Adrian stared at the message for a long time. He could deflect, could make a joke, could remind her about all the reasons this was complicated and messy and probably a terrible idea. But he was tired of hiding from truth, even when it scared him.
"I never stopped loving you either," he typed. "I tried. But I couldn't. You were always there in the back of my mind, the road not taken, the life I walked away from. And now you're here again, and I don't know what to do with that, except tell you the truth. I love you. I'm terrified. And I have no idea how to make this work with everything else in my life. But I love you." He sent it before he could reconsider. Her response came immediately. "That's enough. We'll figure out the rest later." Adrian smiled at his phone like an idiot. Then he looked up and saw Mia standing in the doorway in her pajamas, watching him. "Can't sleep?" he signed. "I heard your phone. You were smiling." She patted across the room and climbed into his lap, getting too big for this, but still young enough to want it. "Was it Vivian?" "Yes." "Do you love her?" The question shouldn't have surprised him. Mia was 7, but she wasn't blind. She'd seen how he looked at Vivian, how Vivian looked at him. "Yes," he signed. "Is that okay?" Mia thought about this seriously. "Will she be nice to me? Very nice. She already likes you. Will she try to be my mom?" Adrian's heart clenched. "No, sweetheart. She'll just be Vivian, another person who cares about you. Is that okay?" Mia nodded slowly. "Okay. But can we still have our Saturday mornings, just us?" "Always. That's our time. Nothing changes that." She leaned her head against his chest, satisfied. "I'm glad you're not sad anymore, Dad. You've been sad for a long time." Adrian held her tighter, wondering how his 7-year-old had become wise enough to see things he'd been trying to hide. "I'm working on it," he signed against her back. "Good," she signed back, "because you deserve to be happy." Out of the mouths of children. Adrian sat there with his daughter in his lap, his phone still showing Vivian's last message, and tried to believe what Mia said, that he deserved to be happy, that 8 years of penance might be enough, that maybe, possibly, this wreckage could become something better. The next morning, Adrian woke to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. The story had exploded overnight. Vivian's press conference had been picked up by national news. Richard Cross's attorney had released a statement denying everything and threatening lawsuits. The city attorney's office had announced a formal criminal investigation. The stock price of Cross Development had cratered, and apparently
Adrian was a hero. Whistleblower who risked everything to expose construction fraud, one headline read. The maintenance worker who brought down $1 billion empire, said another. His face was everywhere, usually next to Vivian's, both of them looking tired and determined and like they'd just walked through fire. His phone rang, a number he didn't recognize. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Mr. Cole, this is Janet Rodriguez from the State Engineering Board. I've been reviewing your original safety reports from 8 years ago, and I'd like to offer you something. What kind of something? Reinstatement. Full restoration of your engineering license. We're prepared to acknowledge that you were wrongfully blacklisted, and we'd like to make it right. Additionally, several firms have already reached out asking if you'd be interested in consulting work. Apparently, your reputation for integrity is exactly what they're looking for. Adrian sat down hard on his couch. I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it. I'm sending over the paperwork today. You have options, Mr. Cole. Real ones. You don't have to spend the rest of your career fixing air filters if you don't want to. She hung up. Adrian stared at his phone, trying to process what had just happened. His license, his career, 8 years of exile, erased with a single phone call. He called Vivian immediately. Did you have anything to do with this? He asked when she answered. With what? The engineering board just called. They're reinstating my license. Adrian, that's wonderful. She sounded genuinely delighted. But no, I had nothing to do with it. That's all you. Your original reports were solid. You were right about everything. They know that now. They're just fixing their mistake. 8 years later. Better late than never. Adrian wanted to be angry about the timing, about the years he'd lost, about the career that had been stolen from him. But mostly he just felt relieved. Like a weight he'd been carrying so long he'd forgotten it was there had finally been lifted. What are you going to do? Vivian asked. I don't know. Take some time. Figure out what I want. Make sure Mia's okay with whatever I decide. He paused. What about you? What are you going to do? Testify. Cooperate with investigations. Try to make things right for the families we hurt. Beyond that? She laughed softly. I have no idea. I've never not had a plan before. It's terrifying. Want to be terrified together? I thought you'd never ask. They made plans to meet for dinner, a real dinner, not emergency strategy sessions or press conferences. Just the three of them sitting down like normal people trying to figure out how to build something real from the wreckage. The criminal investigation moved faster than anyone expected. Within a week, Richard Cross was arrested on charges of fraud, bribery, and reckless endangerment. 2 other executives were arrested alongside him. The city inspector who'd signed off on the Riverside building was charged with accepting bribes. And Cross Development's board of directors announced they were dissolving the company entirely, selling off assets to pay restitution to affected families. Vivian watched her father's perp walk on the news with an expression Adrian couldn't read. They were at her hotel. She still hadn't found a new apartment, was living out of a suitcase like she couldn't quite believe her old life was really gone. Are you okay? Adrian asked. I don't know. Ask me in a year. She turned off the TV. He looks so old. When did he get so old? Vivian, I know what he did. I know he deserves this. But he's still my father. I still remember him teaching me to ride a bike and helping with homework and telling me I could be anything I wanted. Her voice broke. How do you reconcile that? How do you love someone and hate what they've become? Adrian pulled her close. You just do. Both things at once. It doesn't make sense, but it's true anyway. She cried against his shoulder, mourning the father she thought she had, grieving the man he'd actually been. Adrian held her and didn't try to fix it because some things couldn't be fixed. They could only be survived. 2 weeks after the press conference, Adrian got a call from a different engineering firm. They wanted him to consult on a major housing project, affordable units, proper safety protocols, everything done right. The pay was good. The work was meaningful. And they specifically said they wanted him because of his willingness to speak truth to power. What do you think? He asked Mia that night. Would you be okay if I went back to engineering? It would mean busier schedules sometimes, less flexibility, but also better pay, more stability. Will you still be home for dinner? Most nights, yes. Will you still do Saturday mornings? Always. She considered this carefully. Then I think you should do it. You're really good at building things. You should get to do what you're good at. So he took the job. started the following Monday. Spent his first day back in a proper office, feeling like he'd stepped through a time portal to a life he'd thought was gone forever. He was rusty, disoriented, behind on 8 years of code updates and new techniques. But it felt right in a way nothing had felt right in a very long time. Vivian started consulting too, helping other companies audit their safety protocols and compliance procedures. She was frank about her experience with cross-development, used it as a cautionary tale, built a new career out of the wreckage of her old one. She was good at it, better than good. Companies wanted someone who'd proven she'd choose ethics over profit. She became the person they called when they wanted to do things right. Adrian and Vivian fell into a rhythm. Dinners twice a week. Saturdays when Mia had school activities. Slow and careful, building trust, learning each other all over again as the people they'd become. It wasn't the fairy tale reunion some of the news stories tried to make it. It was harder than that. More real. They fought sometimes. Misunderstood each other. Carried baggage from 8 years of separate lives. But they kept showing up. Kept trying. Kept believing that maybe broken people could build something strong. 3 months after the press conference, Vivian knocked on Adrian's apartment door holding a large flat package. "What's this?" Adrian asked. "Open it." Inside was a framed architectural drawing. Plans for a community center with affordable housing units, green space, accessible design, every safety feature implemented perfectly. At the bottom, in careful lettering, Cole Cross Community Project. "I bought the land where the Riverside building stood," Vivian said, "after they tore it down, and I want to build something better there, something safe, something that actually serves the community. With you, if you'll do it with me." Adrian stared at the plans, at their names side by side, at the second chance drawn in careful lines and measurements. "It'll take years," he said. "I know. And millions of dollars. I know. And it won't fix what your father did. I know that too." She met his eyes. "But it's a start, isn't it?" Adrian looked at the plans again, then at Mia, who was watching from the doorway with hope written all over her face, then back at Vivian, who'd sacrificed everything for truth and was still standing, still fighting, still believing they could build something better from the ashes. "Yeah," he said quietly, "it's a start." They kissed, and it felt like promise, like possibility, like two people who'd been lost finally finding their way home. The architectural plans spread across Adrian's kitchen table looked like hope, translated into lines and measurements. It was 3 a.m, and he should have been sleeping, but sleep felt impossible when he was this close to something that mattered. Vivian sat across from him, her hair pulled back in a messy knot, wearing one of his old college sweatshirts she'd claimed as her own, somewhere in the last few months. "If we adjust the support columns here," she said, tapping the blueprint with a pencil, "we can create more open space in the community center without compromising structural integrity. That'll add about 2 weeks to the timeline." "I know, but it's worth it. The families deserve space that feels welcoming, not institutional." Adrian looked at her, really looked at her, the dark circles under her eyes, the coffee stain on the sweatshirt sleeve, the way her hand shook slightly from exhaustion and too much caffeine. She'd lost everything to get to this moment. Her company, her father, her entire identity. And here she was at 3 a.m., obsessing over whether a community center felt welcoming enough. "What?" she asked, catching him staring. "Nothing. Just thinking about how far we've come. From an elevator to a kitchen table covered in blueprints. Quite a journey." She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "My father's arraignment is tomorrow. Today, technically. In 6 hours. Adrian reached across the table and took her hand. "You don't have to go." "Yes, I do. The prosecutor wants me there. Says it sends a message." "What message? That you're willing to watch your father get destroyed? That I'm willing to stand by the truth, even when it costs me." She pulled her hand back and returned to the plans. "Besides, someone has to represent the families he hurt. Someone who knows exactly what he did and why it was wrong." "Vivian, I'm fine, Adrian. I've made my peace with it." She hadn't, though. Adrian could see it in the way her shoulders tensed whenever someone mentioned Richard Cross, in the way she avoided driving past the old Cross Development headquarters, in the way she woke up sometimes in the middle of the night and just sat there, staring at nothing, carrying grief she wouldn't share. But he didn't push. He'd learned that about her over these months. She processed pain privately, internally, Like if she kept it contained enough, it might eventually just disappear. It never did, but she kept trying anyway. The arraignment happened in a courthouse downtown, in a room that smelled like old wood and broken promises. Adrian sat in the gallery next to Mrs. Chen, who'd insisted on coming for moral support. Vivian sat up front with the prosecution team, her back straight, her face carefully neutral. Richard Cross was brought in wearing an orange jumpsuit that looked obscene on him, like seeing a king dressed in rags. He was thinner than Adrian remembered, grayer, older. 3 months in jail awaiting trial had stripped away the polish, revealed the man underneath. He looked human now, vulnerable, which somehow made the whole thing worse. Their eyes met across the courtroom, Adrian and Richard, and something passed between them. Not forgiveness, not understanding, just recognition. Two men who'd both made choices they couldn't take back. Two men who'd both lost things they'd never get back. Two men standing on opposite sides of a line drawn in other people's pain. The judge read the charges: fraud, bribery, reckless endangerment, criminal conspiracy. The words sounded clinical, sterile, nothing like the lived reality of families evacuated in the night, of children crying, of 8 years stolen from Adrian's life. Richard Cross pleaded not guilty to all charges. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Diana Chen, who Adrian had come to respect deeply, stood up. Your Honor, given the severity of these charges and the defendant's considerable resources, the state requests remand without bail. Richard's attorney objected immediately, argued that his client was a pillar of the community, not a flight risk, deserving of the presumption of innocence. The judge wasn't buying it. Bail is denied. Trial date is set for October 15th. This court is adjourned. It was over in 15 minutes. 15 minutes to begin the process of dismantling a man's entire legacy. Richard was led out in handcuffs. He looked back once, searching the gallery, and his eyes found Vivian. She stared back without flinching. Whatever he saw in her face made him look away first. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Vivian pushed through them without comment, Adrian and Mrs. Chen flanking her like bodyguards. They made it to the car and drove away in silence. You okay? Adrian asked after 10 minutes. No, Vivian said, but I will be. Mrs. Chen leaned forward from the back seat. You did the right thing, dear, even when the right thing hurts. Does it ever stop hurting? I don't know, but you learned to carry it better. They drove back to Adrian's apartment. Mia was there with a neighbor who'd been watching her, and she took one look at Vivian's face and climbed into her lap without asking permission. Vivian held her and cried quietly into her hair while Mia signed to Adrian over her shoulder. Is she sad about her dad? Yes. That's okay. Being sad is okay. Out of the mouths of children. Adrian made tea. Nobody drank and sat with them until Vivian stopped crying and Mia fell asleep in her arms, trusting in that absolute way children trusted when they felt safe. She's good for you, Mrs. Chen said quietly. Both of them are. I know. Don't mess it up. I'll try not to. The weeks that followed were a blur of preparation. The trial was coming. The building project needed permits and approvals and endless bureaucratic nonsense. Adrian was working full-time again as a consulting engineer, rebuilding a career that had been dead for 8 years. Vivian was doing the same, taking on safety audits for companies that wanted to prove they weren't like cross-development. They were building lives from scratch, basically, learning how to be together after 8 years of being apart, learning how to parent together, because that's what it was becoming, even if nobody said it out loud. Vivian showing up for Mia's school events, learning sign language seriously now, taking classes 3 times a week, helping with homework and bedtime routines and all the small domestic things that made a family. It wasn't smooth. They fought about discipline. Vivian thought Adrian was too permissive. Adrian thought Vivian was too rigid. They fought about money. Vivian wanted to pay for everything. Adrian couldn't handle feeling bought. They fought about the trial. Vivian wanted to testify. Adrian wanted her to protect herself. But they kept showing up, kept trying, kept believing that maybe love plus effort could equal something that lasted. One night in September, a month before the trial was set to begin, Adrian came home to find Vivian and Mia cooking dinner together. Or trying to. There was flour everywhere. Mia was signing instructions rapidly while Vivian tried to keep up, both of them laughing when Vivian got the words wrong and accidentally signed something inappropriate. What's happening here? Adrian asked. We're making pizza, Mia signed.
Vivian's really bad at it. I can see that. He surveyed the disaster zone that used to be his kitchen. Should I be worried? Probably, Vivian said. She had flour in her hair and sauce on her shirt and looked happier than he'd seen her in weeks. But we're committed now, no turning back. They ate the pizza on the living room floor because the kitchen table was buried under flour and dishes. It was terrible pizza, undercooked crust, too much cheese, toppings sliding everywhere. But Mia was proud of it, and Vivian was grinning, and Adrian felt something shift in his chest. This was what he'd been running from 8 years ago when those men threatened him. Not just Vivian, not just love, but this specific thing: domestic chaos, shared meals, flour in unexpected places, laughter that came from knowing someone well enough to find their mistakes endearing. He'd been so scared of losing it that he'd thrown it away himself. He wasn't going to make that mistake again. "Marry me," he said. Vivian's pizza slice stopped halfway to her mouth. "What?" "Marry me. Not now. Not until after the trial. Not until we figure out all the complicated logistics. But eventually. Marry me." Mia was bouncing excitedly, signing, "Say yes, say yes, say yes," so fast her hands blurred. Vivian set down her pizza carefully. "Adrian, we've only been back together for 6 months." "I know. We fight constantly. We're both disasters. We have no idea what we're doing." "I know that too. Your proposal is terrible. You're covered in pizza sauce. There's no ring. This is possibly the least romantic moment imaginable." "Probably." He took her hand, flour and all. "But I love you. I've loved you for 8 years, even when I was pretending I didn't. And I don't want to waste any more time being careful or reasonable or waiting for the perfect moment. Life's too short. We've already lost too much. So marry me. Eventually. When you're ready, if you're ready, but know that I'm asking." Vivian looked at him for a long moment, then at Mia, who was practically vibrating with anticipation, then back at Adrian. "Okay," she said. "Okay? Okay, I'll marry you, eventually, when we figure out the logistics, after the trial. But yes." Mia screamed, an actual vocal sound she rarely made, and threw her arms around both of them. They collapsed into a heap on the floor, laughing and crying and covered in pizza, and Adrian thought this might actually be perfect. Not despite the mess, but because of it. Real. Human. Theirs. Mrs. Chen found them like that an hour later when she came over to drop off mail. She took one look at the scene and smiled. "About time," was all she said. The trial started on a gray October morning that felt appropriate for what was about to happen. Adrian sat in the gallery every single day, watching the prosecution build their case brick by methodical brick. Documents, testimony, evidence that Richard Cross had known about the safety violations, and covered them up systematically. The defense fought hard, brought in their own engineers who said the building was fine, that Adrian's concerns had been overblown, that this was all a vindictive ex-employee with an axe to grind. They painted Vivian as emotionally unstable, suggested her relationship with Adrian clouded her judgment, implied this was all revenge for a romance gone wrong. It was brutal. Watching lawyers dissect your life, question your motives, suggest you're lying about the worst moments you've ever lived through. Adrian had to testify for 2 days, getting ripped apart on cross-examination by Richard's attorney, who made him sound bitter and opportunistic, and like he'd concocted this whole story for attention. Vivian had it worse. She testified for 3 days, had to walk through every piece of evidence showing her father's guilt, had to explain why she'd chosen to destroy him publicly rather than handle it privately, had to listen to the defense suggest she was a bad daughter, a vindictive woman, someone willing to lie to punish her father for not giving her enough attention as a child. By the end of her testimony, she looked like she'd been through a war. Adrian met her outside the courtroom and she collapsed against him, not crying, just breathing hard like she'd been running. "I can't do another day of that," she whispered. "You won't have to. You're done. You did so good. I destroyed him up there. Said things I can never take back. Turned him into a monster for everyone to see. You told the truth. That's not the same thing, isn't it?" She pulled back to look at him. "He's still my father. He taught me to ride a bike, helped me with my homework, walked me down the aisle at my sister's wedding. Those things were real too, but nobody cares about that. They only care about the bad things he did. And I'm the one who made sure everyone would know." "He made those choices, Vivian, not you. You're just making sure people understand the consequences." "I know.
But knowing doesn't make it easier. The trial lasted 6 weeks. Witness after witness, expert after expert. Families from the Riverside building testifying about the terror of being evacuated at midnight, of learning their homes had been unsafe for years, of the betrayal of trusting a company that put profits over safety. Marcus Chen testified about the structural failures. Sarah Brennan testified about the falsified inspections. Thomas Whitfield, the inspector who'd been paid off, took the stand with immunity and admitted everything. Confirmed that Richard Cross had personally approved the bribes, had known about the safety violations, had orchestrated the cover-up because fixing the problems would have cost too much and delayed the project. It was damning, comprehensive, impossible to deny. But Richard's lawyers kept fighting, created doubt, suggested that maybe Richard had been misled by subordinates, maybe he'd trusted the wrong people, maybe he was guilty of poor management, but not criminal intent. The jury deliberated for 5 days. 5 days of Adrian and Vivian sitting in coffee shops near the courthouse, trying to work on the building plans, trying to pretend they weren't terrified that justice might not happen. On the 5th day, they got the call. Verdict was in. They rushed to the courthouse. The gallery was packed. Families, reporters, curious onlookers who'd followed the trial. Adrian held Vivian's hand so tight his fingers went numb. Mrs. Chen sat behind them, a steady presence. The jury filed in. None of them looked at Richard Cross. That was a good sign, supposedly. Adrian wasn't sure he believed in signs anymore. The foreman stood. On the count of fraud in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of bribery, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of reckless endangerment, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of criminal conspiracy, we find the defendant guilty. The courtroom exploded into noise, reporters rushing out to file stories, families crying and hugging each other. Richard Cross sitting very still at the defense table, his face gray, his hands shaking. Vivian didn't move, didn't react, just sat there staring straight ahead until Adrian put his arm around her, and she finally turned into his chest and let herself break. "It's over," he said into her hair. "No, it's just starting. Sentencing, appeals, years of this dragging on. But you won. The jury believed the truth. That matters." "Does it? Because I still feel like I lost everything." "Not everything." He pulled back to look at her. "You still have me. You still have Mia. You still have the chance to build something good from all this. That's not nothing." She nodded, not quite believing him, but trying to. Richard Cross was sentenced 3 weeks later to 15 years in federal prison. The judge gave a speech about how people in positions of power had a responsibility to protect those who trusted them, and how Richard's choices had put hundreds of lives at risk. It was a fair sentence, a just sentence. But watching them lead him away in handcuffs, watching Vivian watch her father disappear behind steel doors, Adrian felt no triumph, just sadness for everything that had been lost. In the months that followed, they threw themselves into the building project, breaking ground on the site where the Riverside complex had stood, creating something better in its place. 8 stories of affordable housing with accessible design, green space, community areas where families could gather, every safety code exceeded, every corner done right. Adrian was on site almost every day, sometimes with Mia, who loved wearing her own little hard hat and carrying around blueprints she couldn't read. She'd tell the construction workers what to do in sign language, and they'd pretend to follow her instructions, and Adrian would watch his daughter grow into someone confident and bossy and absolutely fearless. Vivian managed the project from her end. Permits, budgets, endless negotiations with city officials who wanted to help but were tangled in bureaucracy. She was good at it, better than good. She'd found her calling in building things that actually helped people rather than just making money. They got married on a Saturday in May, almost 2 years after that elevator ride. It was a small ceremony in Mrs. Chen's backyard. Just close friends and the families from Riverside who'd become part of their strange extended community. Mia was the flower girl and took her job so seriously she nearly cried when she dropped a petal in the wrong spot. Adrian wore a suit from a thrift store. Vivian wore a simple white dress she'd bought off the rack. There was no fancy venue, no expensive catering, none of the things Vivian could have afforded. Just people who mattered, saying words that mattered, making promises they intended to keep. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, Mia raised her hand. Everyone laughed. She signed, I object to not being asked if this was okay first. Vivian signed back. Is it okay? Mia pretended to think about it very seriously, then nodded. Yeah. I guess you can marry my dad. More laughter. Then vows. Simple ones. Adrian promising to show up, to tell the truth, to keep trying even when things got hard. Vivian promising the same. No flowery language about souls or destiny or being incomplete without each other. Just two people who'd chosen each other, acknowledging that choice would have to be made again and again, every day, for the rest of their lives. They kissed. Everyone clapped. And then they ate Mrs. Chen's cooking and danced badly to music from someone's phone and let Mia stay up past her bedtime because it was a special day. How does it feel? Marcus asked Adrian later when they were sitting on the porch watching the party wind down. Weird. Good weird, but still weird, like I'm waiting for something to go wrong. That feeling ever go away? I don't know. Ask me in 20 years. Marcus laughed. You did good, Adrian. The building, the trial, getting the girl. You did real good. We did good. Couldn't have done any of it without you. Sure you could have. Would have taken longer, but you'd have figured it out. Marcus stood up, stretched. The building opens next month. You ready for that? No, but I'll show up anyway. The Cold Cross Community Center opened on a bright morning in June, 3 years after Adrian had stepped into the wrong elevator. The ceremony was bigger than the wedding. Hundreds of people, news cameras, city officials who wanted to be associated with the success story. But also the families who'd lived through the Riverside evacuation. The engineers who'd worked to make this building safe. The people who'd fought alongside them for truth and accountability. Adrian stood at the microphone feeling like an imposter. He'd spent 8 years being invisible, learning to take up as little space as possible. And now everyone was looking at him, waiting for him to say something profound. 3 years ago, he started, his voice shaking slightly, I was nobody, a maintenance worker trying to keep his head down and survive. I'd spent 8 years running from my past because I thought that was the only way to keep the people I loved safe. And then I stepped into an elevator and came face to face with everything I'd been running from. He looked at Vivian, who was standing to the side with Mia. Someone recently asked me if all of this was worth it, the trial, the exposure, everything we lost to get here. And honestly, some days I don't know. Some days I wake up and wish I'd just kept my mouth shut, stayed invisible, let the past stay buried. Uncomfortable shifting in the crowd. This wasn't the inspiring speech they'd expected. But then I come here, Adrian continued, gesturing at the building behind him, and I see what we built. Not just a structure, but a promise. A promise that some people still care more about doing things right than doing things cheap. A promise that safety matters, that truth matters, that ordinary people can fight power and sometimes, not always, but sometimes, they can actually win. He paused, gathering his thoughts. Here's what I've learned. Doing the right thing doesn't feel good. It feels terrible. It costs you everything. It makes you question whether it was worth it. But you do it anyway because the alternative is learning to live with yourself after you chose comfort over courage. And that cost is even higher. Mia was signing something to Vivian. Vivian translated quietly, then laughed and shook her head. My daughter just asked if I'm almost done, Adrian said. She wants to see her room in the new building. Kid's got her priorities straight. The crowd laughed. So I'll wrap this up. This building exists because people chose to be uncomfortable, chose to speak up, chose to believe that maybe, possibly, we could do better than we've been doing. It exists because 240 families refused to let what happened to them be forgotten, because engineers put safety before profit, because one woman had the courage to stand against her own father when he was wrong. He looked directly at Vivian now. That's the real story here. Not that the bad guy got caught, not that justice prevailed, though it did, barely, but that when faced with an impossible choice, some people still choose right over easy, and that choice, repeated enough times, can actually change things. Vivian was crying now, not even trying to hide it. Mia hugged her leg, and Mrs. Chen stood behind them both, beaming like she'd just watched her own children succeed. So this building, Adrian finished, is for everyone who's ever been told they don't matter, for everyone who's been scared to speak up, for everyone who survived by staying small and wishes they could be bigger. This building says you can. It won't be easy. You might lose things that matter, but you can. And that possibility, that tiny chance that doing the right thing might actually work, that's what I hope people take from all of this. He stepped away from the microphone. The crowd applauded, but Adrian barely heard it. He was watching Vivian, who was walking toward him with Mia, and he realized this was what healing looked like. Not forgetting, not moving on, but learning to carry your scars without letting them define you. They cut the ribbon together, Adrian, Vivian, and Mia. The first family started moving in that afternoon. By evening, there were lights in the windows, children playing in the courtyard, the sounds of life filling spaces that had been empty. Adrian and Vivian stood on the sidewalk after dark, watching the building they'd created from ruins and stubbornness and the refusal to accept that corrupt systems always won.
My father's lawyer called yesterday, Vivian said quietly. He's appealing the sentence. Says the trial was biased, that I shouldn't have been allowed to testify. Will it work? Probably not, but it means more years of this, more testimony, more questions, more having to relive all of it. You don't have to do it. You could walk away, let the state handle it. I know, but I won't. She leaned against him. Those families in there deserve someone who'll keep fighting for them, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Adrian kissed the top of her head. You're kind of amazing, you know that? I'm really not. I'm just doing what anyone would do. No, most people wouldn't. Most people would have looked the other way, protected themselves, chosen easy over right. You didn't. That matters. They stood there in comfortable silence, two people who'd learned that happy endings didn't look like the movies promised. There was no final scene where everything was perfect, and all the pain was worth it, and they lived happily ever after. There was just this, standing outside a building they'd built together, watching families begin lives in spaces designed to keep them safe, carrying the knowledge that they'd done something real and difficult and maybe, possibly, good. Mia came running out of the building, excited, signing about the playground they'd installed on the roof. And could they go see it now, please? It's past your bedtime, Adrian signed. But it's a special day. Every day is a special day if you pay attention, Vivian signed. Then to Adrian, but yeah, we should go look. She's right. It's worth celebrating.
They took the elevator up, not the maintenance elevator this time, but the regular one, shiny and new and compliant with every accessibility code. Mia pressed all the buttons because she could, because she was 7 and that's what 7-year-olds did. The elevator didn't malfunction, didn't take them to the wrong floor, didn't trap them with their past. It just worked. The way things worked when they were built properly. With care, with integrity, with the understanding that people's lives depended on these small choices made by engineers and contractors and inspectors who took their responsibilities seriously. The rooftop playground was beautiful in the moonlight, empty now, waiting for the children who'd discover it tomorrow. Swings and slides designed for all abilities. Soft surfaces that would catch falls. Equipment tested and retested to make sure it was safe. Mia immediately claimed the highest slide, signing that she wanted to go down it, but only if they were watching. We're watching, Adrian signed back. She went down shrieking with joy, that pure, unself-conscious happiness kids had before the world taught them to be careful. At the bottom, she looked up at them with a grin that said this, all of this, was worth whatever it had cost. She's going to be okay, Vivian said, despite everything, despite us being a mess, despite all the complications. She's going to be okay. More than okay, she's going to be strong. The kind of strong that comes from watching adults fight for what matters. Is that what we're doing? Fighting for what matters? I think so. I hope so. Adrian pulled Vivian closer. I know this isn't the life you imagined. The CEO of a failed company, married to a guy who fixes air conditioning, living in a one-bedroom apartment while you fight endless legal battles with your father. Good, because the life I imagined was built on lies. This one's built on truth. That makes it better, even when it's harder. Mia ran back up the slides ladder, signing that she wanted to go again. Watch me, watch me, watch me. So they watched. They watched their daughter, because that's what Mia was now. Theirs in all the ways that mattered, play on equipment they'd designed to keep her safe. They watched the city lights spread out below them, millions of people living in buildings that might or might not be safe, trusting systems that might or might not protect them. And they made the choice, again, to keep fighting, to keep building, to keep believing that maybe ordinary people with ordinary courage could create something that lasted. Not because they'd be remembered, Not because they'd get credit, not because it would make them happy, but because someone had to. Because the alternative was accepting that power always won, that corruption was inevitable, that trying to change things was foolish and naive and not worth the cost. And they'd already paid that cost. Might as well make it mean something. Adrian thought about the maintenance worker who'd stepped into that elevator 3 years ago, scared, broken, running from a past he couldn't escape. That person felt like someone else now, someone from a different life. This life was messier, more complicated, more expensive in every way that mattered. But it was honest, built on choices he could defend, on love that had survived being tested, on the stubborn belief that integrity wasn't just a word people threw around, but something you could actually live by if you were willing to pay for it. Mia came over and climbed into Vivian's lap, tired now, ready to go home. Vivian held her and signed with one hand. Did you have fun? Yeah, can we come back tomorrow? Every day if you want. Good. This is my favorite place now. Adrian looked at his family, this strange, imperfect, hard-won family, and felt something settle in his chest. Not happiness exactly, not peace, but something close to acceptance. The understanding that this was his life now. These were his people. This was the meaning he'd built from wreckage and truth, and the choice to stop running. It wasn't the ending he'd imagined, wasn't the redemption arc the movies promised, but it was real. And it was his. And that was enough. They took the elevator back down, drove home through streets that were starting to empty, carried a sleeping Mia up 3 flights of stairs because the elevator in their building was broken again and the landlord never fixed anything. Put her to bed in a room that was too small, in an apartment that was too cramped, in a life that was too complicated. But they'd built it themselves. Honestly. With intention. With the knowledge that they'd tried to do something that mattered. And in the end, maybe that was what redemption really looked like. Not erasing the past, not being forgiven for your failures, but learning to carry them without letting them stop you from building something better. Adrian and Vivian sat on their worn couch in their cramped living room and looked at each other with the tired satisfaction of people who'd fought a war and survived it. Same time tomorrow? Vivian asked. Same time tomorrow, Adrian agreed. Because that's what you did. You showed up, you tried, you built things that might outlast you. You told the truth even when it cost you. You loved imperfectly and failed sometimes and got back up and tried again. The world didn't hand out rewards for good behavior, but it gave you moments like this, sitting with someone you loved, having made choices you could defend, knowing that somewhere across town, families were sleeping safely in a building you'd helped create. That had to be enough. That would be enough. Adrian closed his eyes and felt Vivian's weight against his side, and heard Mia's soft breathing from the other room, and thought about the long road from that maintenance elevator to this couch. All the pain and fear and loss that had brought them here. All the courage it had taken to stop running and start fighting. It wasn't a fairy tale, but it was theirs. Built from honesty and stubbornness and the belief that ordinary people could do extraordinary things if they refused to accept that wrong was inevitable. The elevator might have been an accident, but everything that came after was a choice. Their choice. Made again and again every day, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. Because that's when choices mattered most.